How this book came to be. The seeds for this book were sown when we were young mothers attending a parent group led by the late child psychologist Dr. Haim Ginott. After each session we'd drive home together and marvel at the power of the new communication skills we were learning and lament the fact that we hadn't known them years before when we were working with children. Professionally, one of us in the New York City high schools, the other in neighborhood houses in Manhattan. We couldn't have predicted then what would grow out of that early experience. 2 decades later, the books we had written for parents had passed the 2 million mark and had been translated into over a dozen languages. The lectures we had given in almost every state in the United States and almost every province in Canada drew large, enthusiastic audiences. Over 50,000 groups had used our audio and video group workshop programs in places as far-flung as Nicaragua, Kenya, Malaysia, and New Zealand, and all during that 20-year period, we kept hearing from teachers about the changes they had made in their classrooms as a result of either attending our lectures or taking our courses or reading one of our books. Inevitably, they urged us to write a similar book for them. A teacher from Troy, Michigan, wrote, "After over 20 years of experience in working with disruptive, at-risk students, I was frankly amazed at the number of strategies I learned from the books you've written for parents. Currently, the district in which I serve as teacher consultant is in the process of designing a new school-wide discipline plan. I strongly believe that the philosophy in your book should serve as the cornerstone of that new plan. Have you considered writing a book specifically for teachers?" A school social worker in Florissant, Missouri, wrote, "Recently I gave your How to Talk So Kids Will Listen group workshop program to parents in my district. One of the parents, who was also a teacher, began to use her new skills in her classroom and noticed a marked reduction in behavior problems. This came to the attention of the principal, who had been concerned about the increasing use of corporal punishment and suspensions in her school. She was so impressed by the changes in this one classroom that she asked me to run a workshop for the entire staff. The results were dramatic. There was a sharp decline in requests for paddling, a decrease in suspensions, a drop in absenteeism, and self-esteem seemed to rise throughout the school." A New York City guidance counselor wrote, "I'm deeply concerned about the growing number of children who are bringing knives and guns to school. I can't help thinking that more security guards and metal detectors are not the answer. But better communication might be. Maybe if teachers knew the skills you write about, they'd be better equipped to help these kids with short fuses handle their anger in nonviolent ways. How about a book for teachers, principals, parent volunteers, teacher aides, the school bus drivers, secretaries, etc., etc., etc.? We considered these suggestions seriously but finally agreed that we couldn't take on the responsibility of writing a book for teachers. After all, we weren't in the trenches now. Then came the fateful phone call from Rosalind Templeton and Lisa Nyberg. Lisa was teaching 3rd and 4th grades at Bratton Elementary School in Springfield, Oregon. Rosalind was teaching future teachers at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. Both conveyed their distress at the coercive and punitive practices commonly used in schools to make children behave, and said that for a long time now, they had been searching for materials that would offer teachers alternative methods to help students become self-directed and self-disciplined. When they came across How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, they felt it was just what they had been looking for and asked for our permission to write an adaptation for teachers. As we talked further, it became clear that their experience was extensive. Both women had taught in urban, suburban, and rural schools in different parts of the country, both had earned their doctorates in education, and both were in demand as workshop leaders at teacher conferences. Suddenly the project that we had hesitated to take on for so long seemed feasible. If, in addition to our own classroom experiences and all the materials we had collected from teachers over the past 20 years, we could also draw upon the past and present experiences of these two educators, then there would be nothing to hold us back. That summer Rosalind and Lisa flew in to meet with us. We all felt comfortable with each other from the beginning. After exploring the shape this new book might take, we decided to tell a story from the point of view of a young teacher who was trying to learn better ways to get through to her students. Her experience would be a fusion of all of ours. The narrative would be augmented by elements found in our earlier works, cartoons, reminder pages, questions and answers, and illustrative stories. But the more we talked, the clearer it became that if we were going to give a whole picture of what it takes to educate a child, then we had to look beyond the classroom and give equal attention to the first and permanent teacher in a child's life, the parent. Whatever takes place in school between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. is deeply affected by what goes on before and after. No matter how well-meaning the parent and teacher, if they don't both have the tools to help them carry out their good intentions, the child will be the loser. Parents and teachers need to join forces and form working partnerships. Both need to know the difference between the words that demoralize and those that give courage, between the words that trigger confrontation and those that invite cooperation, between the words that make it impossible for a child to think or concentrate and the words that free the natural desire to learn. Then it occurred to us that we had an additional responsibility to today's generation of children. Never before have so many young people been exposed to so many images of casual cruelty. Never before have they witnessed so many vivid demonstrations of problems being solved by beatings or bullets or bombs. Never before has there been such an urgent need to provide our children with a living model of how differences can be resolved with honest and respectful communication. That's the best protection we can give them against their own violent impulses. When the inevitable moments of frustration and rage occur, instead of reaching for a weapon, they can reach for the words they've heard from the important people in their lives. With that conviction, the project was launched. 3 years and many drafts later, when we finally had the finished manuscript in our hands, we all felt a deep sense of satisfaction. We had laid down a clear set of guidelines for how to talk so kids can learn at home and in school. We had given concrete examples of the attitude and language that lie at the very heart of the learning process. We had shown how to create an emotional environment that makes it safe for children to open themselves up to what is new and unfamiliar. We had demonstrated how children can be moved to take responsibility and exercise self-discipline. We had shared a multitude of methods that encourage children to believe in who they are and who they can become. It is our earnest hope that the ideas in this book will help you to inspire and empower the young people in your life. Who is I? When we set out to write this book, we decided to create one character, Liz Lander, who would speak for all of us. She would be the young teacher we once were, and her struggle to relate to her students in more helpful ways would mirror our own. She would be our I. One how to deal with feelings that interfere with learning. It was the memories of my own teachers, both those I loved and those I hated, that made me decide to become one. I had a long mental list of all the mean things I would never say or do to my students, and a clear vision of how infinitely patient and understanding I would be. All during my education courses in college, I held on to my conviction that I could teach kids in a way that would make them want to learn. My first day as a real teacher came as a shock. As much as I had planned and prepared, I was totally unprepared for these 32 sixth graders. 32 kids with loud voices, high energy, and powerful wants and needs. Halfway through the morning the first rumblings began. Who stole my pencil? Get out of my face. Shut up. I'm trying to listen to the teacher. I pretended not to hear and went on with the lesson, but the eruptions continued. Why do I have to sit next to him? I don't understand what we're supposed to do. He punched me. She started it. My head began to pound. The noise level in the room continued to rise. Words of patience and understanding died on my lips. This class needed a teacher who was in charge and in control. I heard myself saying, "Cut it out. Nobody stole your pencil. You have to sit next to him because I said so. I don't care who started it. I want it ended. Now." What do you mean you don't understand? I just explained it. I can't believe this class. You're acting like first graders. Will you please sit still? One boy ignored me. He left his seat, walked over to the sharpener, and stood there grinding his pencil to a nub. In my firmest voice I ordered, "That's enough. Sit down right now. You can't make me do nothing," he said. "We'll talk about this after school. I can't stay. I ride the bus. Then I'll need to call your parents to get this settled." "You can't call my parents. We don't got no phone." By 3 o'clock I was exhausted. The kids burst out of the classroom and spilled out onto the streets. More power to them. They were their parents' responsibility now. I'd done my time. I slumped in my chair and stared at the empty desks. What went wrong? Why wouldn't they listen? What did I have to do to get through to these kids? All during those first few months of teaching, the pattern was the same. I'd start each morning with high hopes and leave every afternoon feeling overwhelmed by the drudgery and tedium of having to drag my class through the required curriculum. But worse than anything, I was turning into the kind of teacher I never wanted to be: angry, bossy, and belittling. And my students were becoming increasingly sullen and defiant. As the term wore on, I found myself wondering how long I could last. Jane Davis, the teacher next door, came to my rescue. The day after I poured my heart out to her, she stopped by my room and handed me her worn copy of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. "I don't know if this will help," she said, "but the skills in this book saved my sanity with my own kids at home. And they sure make a difference in my classroom." I thanked her, put the book in my briefcase, and forgot about it. A week later I was lying in bed nursing a cold. Idly I reached for the book and opened it. The italicized words on the first page jumped out at me. Direct connection between how kids feel and how they behave. When kids feel right, they'll behave right. How do we help them to feel right? By accepting their feelings. I lay back on my pillow and closed my eyes. Did I accept my students' feelings? In my head I replayed some of the exchanges I'd had with the kids that week. Student: "I can't write." Me: "That's not true." Student: "But I can't think of anything to write about." Me: "Yes, you can. Just quit complaining and start writing." Student: "I hate history. Who cares what happened 100 years ago?" Me: "You should care. It's important to know your country's history." Student: "It's boring." Me: "No, it isn't. If you paid attention, you'd find it interesting." It was ironic. I was the one who was always preaching to the children about the right of each individual to his or her opinions and feelings. Yet in practice, whenever the kids expressed their feelings, I dismissed them, argued with them. My underlying message was: you're wrong to feel what you feel. Listen to me instead. I sat up in bed and tried to remember. Did my teachers ever do that to me? There was that one time in high school when I was stricken over my first failing grade and my math teacher tried to give me a pep talk. "There's nothing to be upset about, Liz. It's not that you lack ability in geometry. You just haven't applied yourself. You have to make up your mind that you're going to do it. The trouble with you is, your attitude is bad." He was probably right, and I knew he meant well, but his words left me feeling stupid and inadequate. At one point I stopped listening and watched his mustache moving up and down and waited for him to finish so I could get away from him. Is that what my students felt about me? Over the next few weeks I tried to respond more sensitively to my students' feelings, to reflect them accurately. It's not easy to choose a topic you want to write about. I hear how you feel about history. You're wondering why anyone would even care about what happened so long ago. It helped. I could see immediately that the kids experienced the difference. They nodded, looked me straight in the eye, and told me more. Then one day Alex announced, "I don't want to go to gym and no one can make me." That was enough. I didn't hesitate for a minute. In icy tones I answered, "You will go to gym or you will go to the office." Why was it so hard to acknowledge kids' feelings? At lunch I asked that same question aloud and told my friend Jane and the others at my table what I'd been reading and thinking about. Maria Estes, a parent volunteer, sprang to the defense of teachers. "There are so many children to teach," she said, "and so much to teach them. How can you expect yourself to worry about every little word?" Jane looked thoughtful. "Maybe," she said, If the adults in our lives had worried a little about their words, we wouldn't have so much to unlearn today. Let's face it. We're products of our past. We speak to our students the way our parents and teachers spoke to us. I know, even with my own kids at home, it took me a long time to stop repeating the old script. It was a big step for me to go from, "that doesn't hurt, it's only a little scratch," to "a scratch can hurt." Ken Watson, a science teacher, looked baffled. "Am I missing something?" he asked. "I don't see that it makes much difference." I thought hard, hoping to come up with an example that would let him experience the difference for himself. Then I heard Jane say, "Ken, imagine that you're a teenager and that you just made the school team. Basketball, football, whatever." Ken smiled. "Soccer," he said. "Okay," Jane said, nodding. "Now imagine you went to your first practice session, filled with enthusiasm, and the coach called you aside and told you that you were cut from the team." Ken groaned. A little later, Jane continued, "You see your homeroom teacher in the hallway and tell her what just happened. Now pretend that I'm that teacher. I'll respond to your experience in a number of different ways. Just for the heck of it, jot down what the kid inside you feels or thinks after each of my responses." Ken grinned, took out his pen, and reached for a paper napkin to write on. Here are the different approaches Jane tried with him. Denial of feelings. You're getting yourself all worked up over nothing. The world isn't going to come to an end because you didn't make some team. Forget about it. The philosophical response. Life isn't always fair, but you have to learn to roll with the punches. Advice. You can't let these things get you down. Try out for another team. Questions. Why do you think you were dropped? Were the other players better than you? What are you going to do now? Defense of the other person. Try to see it from the coach's point of view. He wants to produce a winning team. It must have been tough for him to decide who to keep and who let go. Pity. Oh, you poor thing. I'm so sorry for you. You tried so hard to make the team, but you just weren't good enough. Now all the other kids know. I'll bet you could just die of embarrassment. Amateur psychoanalysis. Did you ever consider that the real reason you were cut from the team was that your heart wasn't in your playing? I think that on a subconscious level, you didn't want to be on the team, so you messed up on purpose. Ken threw up his hands. Stop. Enough. I get the idea. I asked Ken if I could see what he had written. He tossed me the napkin. I read it aloud. Don't tell me how to feel. Don't tell me what to do. You'll never understand. You know what you can do with your questions. You're taking everybody's side but mine. I'm a loser. That's the last time I'll ever tell you anything. Oh, dear, Maria said. A lot of those things that Jane just said to Ken sound like what I say to my son, Marco. So what could you do instead? Acknowledge the child's distress, I answered quickly. How? Maria asked. The words wouldn't come to me. I looked to Jane for help. She turned to Ken and fixed her eyes upon him. Ken, she said, to find that you were cut from the team when you were so sure you were on it must have been a big shock and a big disappointment. Ken nodded. It's true, he said. It was a shock. And it was a disappointment. And frankly, it's a relief to have someone finally understand that simple fact. We all had a lot to say to each other after that. Maria confided that no one had ever acknowledged her feelings when she was growing up. Ken asked. How are we supposed to give our students what we never had ourselves? Clearly, we needed more practice if we wanted to become comfortable with this new way of responding to the children. I volunteered to bring in some examples showing how we could acknowledge feelings in the school setting. Here, in cartoon form, is what I worked out and brought to my lunch buddies a few days later. Instead of denying feelings. When feelings are denied, a student can easily become discouraged. Put the feelings into words. When negative feelings are identified and accepted, a student feels encouraged to continue to strive. Instead of criticism and advice. The teacher means well, but when a student is bombarded with criticism and advice, he finds it difficult to think about his problem or take responsibility for it. Acknowledge feelings with a word or sound, oh, or mmm or or ic. By responding to a student's distress with an attitude of concern and an occasional nod or grunt of understanding, we free him to focus on his problem and possibly solve it himself, instead of reasons and explanations. It's frustrating when a student refuses to respond to reason. What can we do instead? Is there a better way to help students overcome their resistance to a task? Give in fantasy what you can't give in reality. When we express a student's wishes in fantasy, we make it easier for her to deal with reality, instead of ignoring feelings. It's hard for children to change their behavior when their feelings are completely ignored. Accept feelings even as you stop unacceptable behavior. It's easier for children to change their behavior when their feelings have been accepted. Ken looked at the illustrations and shook his head. Theoretically, this all sounds wonderful, but to me it's just one more demand upon teachers. Where are we supposed to find the time to help students deal with their feelings? Jane's eyes twinkled. You make time, she said. Get to school earlier. Leave later, rush through lunch, and forget about bathroom breaks. Yeah, Ken added, and somewhere in between planning lessons, grading papers, developing bulletin boards, preparing for conferences and, incidentally, teaching worry about what your students might be feeling or how to give them in fantasy what they can't have in reality. As I listened to Ken, I thought, maybe it is too much to ask of teachers. It was as if Jane had read my mind. Seriously, she said, I know it's a lot to ask of teachers, but I also know how important it is for children to feel understood. The plain fact is that when students are upset, they can't concentrate. And they certainly can't absorb new material. If we want to free their minds to think and learn, then we have to deal respectfully with their emotions. And not just at school, but at home, Maria added emphatically. We all turned to look at her. When I was about 9 years old, she explained, my family moved, and I had to go to a new school. My new teacher was very strict. Whenever I took an arithmetic test, she would hand it back to me with big black X's over every answer I got wrong. She made me bring my paper up to her desk again and again until I got it right. I was so nervous in her class, I couldn't think. Sometimes I even tried to copy the answers from other children. The night before a test, I always got a stomachache. I would say, Mama, I'm scared. And she'd say, there's nothing to be scared of. Just do your best. And my father would say, if you'd study, you wouldn't have to be scared. Then I'd feel even worse. Ken looked at her quizzically. Suppose your mother or father had said, you sound very worried about that test, Maria. Would that have made a difference? Oh, yes. Maria exclaimed. Because then I could have told them about the black X's and the shame of having to do it again and again in front of the whole class. Ken was still skeptical. And that would be enough to make you feel less anxious and do better in math. Maria paused. I think so, she said slowly, because if my parents had listened to my worries and let me talk about them, then I think I would have had more courage to go to school the next day and the ambition to try harder. A few days after this conversation took place, Maria returned, all smiles, and pulled out a small piece of folded paper from her purse. I want you to hear some of the things my own children said to me this week. After I tell you, you must all guess what I didn't say to them. The first is from my daughter, Anna Ruth. Maria unfolded her paper and read, Mama, my gym teacher made me run laps because I didn't get dressed fast enough and everyone was looking at me. Ken answered immediately. You didn't say, what did you expect your teacher to do? Applaud you? Give you a medal for being slow? Everyone at the table laughed. Maria said, now here's my son, Marco. Ma, don't get mad. I lost my new gloves. This one is mine, Jane said. What? That's the second pair of gloves you've lost this month. Do you think we're made of money? In the future, when you take your gloves off, put them in your pocket. And before you leave the bus, check the seat and the floor to make sure they haven't fallen out. Hold it. What's wrong with that? Ken asked. You're teaching him Responsibility. The timing is wrong, said Jane. Why's that? Because when a person is drowning, it's not the time to give swimming lessons. Said Ken. I'll have to think about that one. Okay, your turn. Liz, he announced, pointing to me. Maria looked down at her paper and said, this is also from Anna Ruth. I don't know if I want to be in the orchestra anymore. I jumped right in. After all the money we've spent on your violin lessons. You're talking about quitting. Your father is going to be very upset when he hears this. Maria looked at us in amazement. How did all of you know what I almost said? Easy, said Jane. That's what our parents said to us and what I still catch myself saying to my own kids. Maria, Ken said, don't keep us in suspense. What did you say to your children? Well, Maria answered proudly, when Marco couldn't find his new gloves, I didn't lecture him. I said, it can be very upsetting to lose something. Do you think you could have left your gloves on the bus? He stared at me as if he couldn't believe his ears and said tomorrow morning he'd ask the bus driver if he found them. And when Anna Ruth told me the gym teacher made her do laps in front of everybody, I said, that must have been embarrassing. She said, yes, it was, and then changed the subject, which is not unusual for her, because she never tells me anything that's going on. But the big surprise is what happened later. After her music lesson she said, I don't know if I want to be in the orchestra anymore. Her words took the breath out of me, but I said, so, a part of you wants to stay in the orchestra and a part of you doesn't. She became very quiet. Then she started talking and it all came out. She told me she liked playing but that the rehearsals took up so much of her time, she never saw her friends anymore. And now they never even call her and maybe they aren't really her friends anymore. Then she began to cry and I held her. Oh, Maria, I said, deeply touched by her experience. It's funny, isn't it? Jane said. Anna Ruth couldn't tell you what was really troubling her until you accepted her mixed up feelings. Yes, Maria agreed enthusiastically, and once the real problem was out in the open, she got an idea for how to help herself. The next day she told me she decided to stay in the orchestra and maybe she could make some new friends there. That's wonderful, I said. Yes, Maria said with a slight frown, but I only told you the good things I didn't tell you what happened when Marco told me he hated Mr. Peterson. Oh. That's a tough one, I said. Didn't you work in Mr. Peterson's class all last year? Maria looked pained. A very fine teacher, she murmured. Very dedicated. That's what I mean, I said. You were in a bind. On the one hand, you wanted to support your son. On the other hand, you think highly of Mr. Peterson and didn't want to be critical of him. Not just Mr. Peterson, said Maria. I'm probably old-fashioned, but I was brought up to believe that it's wrong to let a child talk against any teacher. But supporting your son, exclaimed Jane, doesn't mean you have to disapprove of Mr. Peterson. She quickly sketched in her version of a parent's typical reaction when a child complains about his teacher. Then we all worked together on creating a helpful dialogue. Our challenge was to avoid agreeing with the child or putting down the teacher. Here's what we came up with. Instead of criticism, questions, and advice. Accept and reflect feelings and wishes. The bell rang. Ken picked up his lunch tray and said, I'm still not sure about all this stuff. Maybe it's okay for parents, but it seems to me it ought to be enough for a teacher to be a decent person who likes kids, knows his subject, and knows how to teach it. Unfortunately, said Jane, walking out with him, it isn't. If you want to be able to teach, then you need students who are emotionally ready to listen and learn. I tagged behind, feeling there was more to say but not sure what. Driving home in the car that afternoon, I replayed the many conversations of the week and felt a new conviction growing within. I wished I had thought to tell Ken. As teachers, our goal is greater than just passing on facts and information. If we want our students to be caring human beings, then we need to respond to them in caring ways. If we value our children's dignity, then we need to model the methods that affirm their dignity. If we want to send out into the world young people who respect themselves and respect others, then we need to begin by respecting them. And we can't do that unless we show respect for what it is they feel. That's what I wished I had said. A quick reminder. Children need to have their feelings acknowledged at home and in school. Child, just because of a few careless mistakes, I only got a 70. Adult, don't worry. You'll do better next time. Instead of dismissing the child's feelings, you can 1. Identify the child's feelings. You sound very disappointed. It can be upsetting when you know the answer and lose points for careless mistakes. 2. Acknowledge the child's feelings with a sound or word. O or MMM or A or IC. 3. Give the child in fantasy what you can't give him in reality. Wouldn't it be great if you had a magic pencil that would stop writing if you were about to make a mistake? 4. Accept the child's feelings even as you stop unacceptable behavior. You're still so angry about that grade, you're kicking your desk. I can't allow that. But you can tell me more about what's upsetting you. Or you can draw it. Questions and stories. From parents and teachers. Questions from parents. 1. Sometimes my 7-year-old son, Billy, falls apart when he does his homework. If he can't figure something out, he'll tear the paper out of his notebook, throw it on the floor, or break his pencils. What can I do about these outbursts? Billy needs a parent who will help him identify his feelings and teach him how to deal with them. He needs to hear, it can be very frustrating when you can't find the answer. It makes you want to rip and throw and break things. Billy, when you feel like that, say, Dad, I'm frustrated. Can you help me? Then maybe we can figure something out together. 2. For the past week, my 13-year-old daughter has been too upset to do homework or study for her midterms. It seems she had told her best friend in strictest confidence that she liked a certain boy, and her friend lost no time in letting the boy know. After I commiserated with her over how betrayed she must have felt, I didn't know what to say next or how to advise her. What could I have told her to do? One of the problems with offering advice, even solicited advice, Mom, what should I do, is that when children are in emotional turmoil, they can't hear you. They're in too much pain. Your hasty advice will seem either irrelevant, what has that got to do with me, invasive, don't tell me what to do, demeaning, do you think I'm so stupid, I couldn't have figured that out for myself, or threatening, that sounds good, but I could never do it. Before your daughter can even begin to think about solutions, there are many concerns she might want to share with you. Should I confront my friend? How can she ever be trusted again? Should I try to keep the relationship? Should I say anything to the boy? If so, what? These are all thoughtful questions that give her an opportunity to understand more about human relationships. By moving in with instant advice, you short-circuit an important learning experience. 3. Is there never a time for advice? After a child has been heard out, you can tentatively ask, how would you feel about? Do you think it would help if? Does it make sense? 2. What do you think would happen if? By giving a child the option to accept, reject, or explore your suggestions, you make it possible for her to hear your thoughts and consider them. For lately my son has been stomping around the house and griping about his social studies teacher. He makes us read the newspaper every day and have debates every week, and he's always giving tests. Nobody gives us as much work as Mr. M. I never know how to respond. It's getting to the point where I'm beginning to feel sorry for the kid. Your son doesn't need your pity. He does need your understanding and appreciation for what he's up against. Any of the following statements might be helpful. So Mr. M really piles on the work. I can hear how much you resent all the pressure. I bet if you were the teacher, you'd declare a holiday every once in a while. Sounds as if Mr. M is a tough and demanding teacher. It must be quite a challenge to live up to his high standards. 5. What can you do about a child who refuses to tell you what's bothering her? As adults, we have all had experiences that we haven't felt like talking about with anyone for the moment or even forever. Some of us prefer to work through our hurt or pain or shame privately, by ourselves. Children are no different. They'll send clear signals when they want to be left alone to nurse their wounds. Even after hearing an empathic comment like something rotten must have happened today, they'll turn away or leave the room or tell you frankly, I don't want to talk about it. All we can do is let them know that we're there for them if they change their minds. Stories from parents. This first story was sent in by a mother who described how her husband helped their son deal with his first week of school anxieties. It was the second day of school and I was trying very hard to get my kids onto an earlier bedtime schedule. Everyone was cooperating except Anthony, my 9-year-old. He kept whining and arguing with me and, no matter what I said, wouldn't get ready for bed. Finally I told my husband, Joe, you'd better take over with your son because I'm about to lose it. Here's what happened next. Joe, hey, Tony, I want to talk to you. Mom says you're giving her a hard time. What's going on? Looks to me like something's eating you. Anthony, I've got a lot of worries. Joe, well, I want to hear about them. All of them. Let's talk in your room. They go into Anthony's bedroom together. Joe comes out about 20 minutes later looking pleased with himself. Me, what happened? Joe, nothing. I put the kid to bed. Me, how'd you manage that? Joe, I wrote down his worries. Me, that's it? Joe, and I read them back to him. Me, then what happened? Joe, I told him I'd help him tackle his worries on the weekend and he put his list under the pillow, got into his pajamas, and went to bed. The next morning, when I was changing Anthony's bed, his list fell on the floor. Here's what it said. What's worrying Anthony? 1 messy closet in room. Not enough space to spread out. 2 needs more clothes for school. 3 great deal of work at school with lots of books to carry. Too soon to start so much work. 4 needs more money for school snacks. 5 something wrong with bike. Chain keeps slipping. 6 lost quarter under washing machine. Makes you feel even the little money you have is disappearing. 7 thinks maybe all money problems can be solved by father giving a $100 check. I had to smile when I read it. You think only grown-ups have real worries. It's easy to forget that kids can have them, too. And just like us, they need someone to listen and take their worries seriously. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This story describes how a mother helped her daughter get past her resistance to the college application process. Almost everyone in the senior class had sent in their college applications. Except my daughter, Karen. She's always had a tendency to leave things till the last minute, but this was going too far. I tried not to nag, to drop a casual reminder whenever I saw an opening, but got nowhere. Then her father sat down with her and tried to get her started. He was very patient. He went over some of the things he thought the college would want to know about her and even helped her to write an outline. Karen promised to get it all done by the weekend, but didn't. As the days went by, I began to get hysterical and found myself yelling at her. I warned her that if she didn't send in her applications immediately, she'd never get into a decent college. Still no action. Then in a moment of inspiration that grew out of desperation I said, Boy, filling out a college application can be pretty threatening. Having to answer all those questions and write an essay that might decide which college you'll end up in is a job anyone would want to put off as long as possible. She gave a loud yeah. I said, wouldn't it be great if they got rid of college applications altogether? And every college hired admissions officers who had ESP and would automatically know how lucky they would be to have you? You'd be flooded with acceptances. Karen broke into a big smile and went upstairs to bed. The next afternoon, she actually started filling out her applications. By the end of the week, they were all in the mail. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This next experience was shared by a mother who had to cope with her child's serious, long-term illness. When my son, TJ, was about 11, he already had a pacemaker and special glasses to hold up his weak eyelids. Now he needed a hearing aid. As we drove home from TJ's audiology appointment, he announced, "You better not even get that stupid hearing aid. There's no way I'm wearing it to school. I'm just gonna throw it in the garbage. I'm gonna throw it in the Toilet. As I drove, my heart sinking, I knew enough to keep my mouth shut until I could think of something to say that wouldn't make things worse. My son looked over at me and said, "Did you hear what I said?" I replied, "Thank God, I hear a boy who absolutely hates the idea of wearing a hearing aid, who feels that it is about the worst thing he can imagine." TJ sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, and if anybody at school makes fun of me, I'm never wearing it again." I paused and ventured, "Perhaps you'd like to have the barber leave your hair a little longer on the sides." TJ said, "Yeah, let's tell him." The pounding in my chest subsided, and I said a prayer of thanks for the skills I had learned. Questions from teachers. 1. Is it my responsibility to deal with kids' feelings in the classroom? Isn't that the counselor's job? I barely have time to teach. Sometimes what seems like the long way turns out to be the short way. It may be better to spend a few minutes dealing with a student's strong feelings than letting them mushroom into a problem that consumes valuable class time. In the process, you will also have helped a child in need. 2. I get nowhere when I question my students about their feelings. They usually answer, "I don't know." Why is that? Children become uncomfortable when adults interrogate them about their feelings. What did you feel? How do you feel now? Angry? Scared? Why do you feel that way? Questions like these cause children to shut down rather than open up. Especially unsettling to a child is the question that demands the answer to why he feels what he feels. The word why requires him to justify his feelings, to come up with a logical, acceptable reason for having them. Often he doesn't know the reason. He doesn't have the psychological sophistication to say, "When the kids at the bus stop teased me, it was a blow to my self-esteem." When a child is unhappy, what he most appreciates is a parent or teacher who will venture a guess as to what might be going on inside him. It hurts to be teased. No matter what the reason, it can hurt a lot. That tells the child that if he needs to talk more, the adult will be emotionally available to him. 3. You say children need to have their worst feelings accepted. Isn't there the danger that students will interpret our acceptance as permission to act out their worst feelings? Not if we make a clear distinction between feelings and behavior. Yes, students have the right to feel their anger and to express it. No, they don't have the right to behave in a way that harms another person, either physically or emotionally. We can tell David, for example, "You were so mad at Michael that you tried to punch him." David, "I can't allow my students to hurt each other." Tell Michael what you feel with words, not fists. 4. I have a junior high student who comes from a dysfunctional family. It's hard for me to be understanding when he tells me, "I hate you," or "You're mean," or uses words that I wouldn't even repeat. I never know how to respond. Any suggestions? Sometimes a troubled student will test his teacher by deliberately lashing out to make her angry or defensive. Part of the fun is to pull the teacher's chain and push her into a long angry harangue while the class smirks. Instead of reacting with hostility, you can quietly say, "I didn't like what I just heard. If you're angry, tell me in another way, and I'll be glad to listen." 5. One of my students recently told me about some troubles she was having at home. It seems her brother and her parents were always fighting. I said, "I can see how unhappy you are about that, but look at all the things you have to be grateful for." She burst into tears. "What did I do wrong?" Beware the word "but." It dismisses the emotion that was just expressed and signals, "Now I'm about to explain why your feelings are not important." Children need to hear an unqualified acceptance of their emotions of the moment. "I can see how unhappy you are about what's happening at home. You wish everyone would get along better." A response that conveys full understanding without reservation gives young people the courage to begin to deal with their problems. Stories from teachers. This first story was from a student teacher who was assigned to a bilingual kindergarten class. Several weeks into the term, a parent who had just moved into the neighborhood brought her little boy into the classroom, introduced him to the teacher, and quickly left. The teacher smiled pleasantly, showed him to his seat, handed him crayons and paper, and told him the class was drawing pictures of someone in their family. The little boy burst into tears. The Teacher said, no, no. No worries. Don't cry. I moved closer to comfort him, and the teacher waved me away. Leave him alone, she said sternly. Or he'll be crying till June. Then she went back to her desk to finish her report. I tried ignoring him, but his crying was too pitiful to bear. I sat down next to him and gently stroked his back. He put his head on his desk and sobbed. Quiero mi mama. Quiero mama. I whispered to him, ¿Quieres tu mama? You want your mommy? He stared at me through tear-filled eyes and said, "Si." I said, in Spanish, it's hard to leave your mother. And even though you know you'll see her soon, it's not easy to wait. Maybe we can make a picture of your mommy. Then I picked up a crayon, made a circle for a face, and drew a nose and a mouth. Then I handed him the crayon and said, "Here, you make the eyes." He stopped crying, clutched the crayon, and made 2 painstaking dots. I said, "You gave her eyes. What color will you make the hair?" He picked up a black crayon and went on to make hair. When I left him, he was still working on his picture. I felt wonderful. I guess I could have ignored him and he might have eventually settled down, but by acknowledging his unhappy feelings, I know I helped him to let go of them. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This next scene was reported by a junior high school shop teacher. He told how he broke up a lunchroom fight by acknowledging the rage of each of the antagonists. I heard yelling and saw 2 boys on the floor. I ran over and yanked off Manuel, who was sitting on Julio and pounding his chest. Here's what went on as I pulled them apart. Me, boy, you 2 are mad at each other. Manuel, he kicked me between the legs. Me, that hurts like crazy. No wonder you're so angry. Julio, he punched me in the stomach. Me, so that's why you kicked him. Manuel, he took my potato chips. Me, oh, so that's what made you mad. Well, I bet now that Julio knows you don't want anyone taking your chips, he won't do it again. Manuel, better not. They stood there glowering at each other. Me, maybe you 2 need some time apart, before you can be friends again. That was it. Later in the hall, I saw the boys walking together and laughing. When they saw me, Julio called out, "Look, we're friends again." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This final story came from a teacher who had to cope with students who were shaken by the outbreak of a war. The day after the Gulf War broke out, many of the children seemed frightened and nervous. I thought the best thing I could do for them was to try to put recent events into a historical perspective, so I prepared a lesson reviewing other major wars the United States had fought, starting with the Revolutionary War. When I announced my intentions, the students were silent. One girl said, "Mrs. Ritter, could we not do what you planned today? Could we talk about how we feel about war?" The class looked at me anxiously. I asked, "Is that what you'd like to do?" Heads nodded solemnly. I was touched that they trusted me enough to ask for an alternative to the planned lesson. One of the boys started. "War is dumb," he said gloomily. All eyes turned to me to see what my reaction would be. "I can hear how strongly you feel," I said. "Tell us more." That did it. The next 30 minutes sped by as the students took turns expressing their worst fears and deepest anxieties. Then someone said, "Let's write." Okay. Good, I thought. Maybe it would help if somehow they could channel their intense feelings into creative expression. They opened their notebooks and wrote in somber silence. Toward the end of the period, I asked if anyone wanted to read his or her work aloud. Many of them did. Here are excerpts from the writing of 3 of the children. Frightened and away from home. They fight and lose their lives for something that could have been prevented. Sylvia. During war you hear many sounds. Sounds of guns or cries for help. But the sound that is loudest of all is the sound of the breaking hearts of families of the men who die at war. Joseph. Many innocent people will die. And many more start to cry. When the children's mommies and daddies die. The children are sad. The children are scared. The children don't understand why. Jamie. By the end of the period, the heavy cloud that had hung over the room seemed to lift. The children, 2 7 skills that invite kids to cooperate. During my first year of teaching, my idea of how to get cooperation was similar to the Nike slogan, "Just do it." After all, I had spent a lot of time carefully planning and segmenting the day into a series of meaningful lessons. We had a lot of material to cover and not much time in which to cover it. So if the class would just sit there quietly and cooperate, we would be able to maximize our instructional time. The word cooperation means to work together toward a common end or purpose. However, I found that some of the students acted as if their common purpose was to put an end to my work. I'd be in the middle of reviewing a homework assignment when someone would ask for a pass to the bathroom, a paper airplane would glide across the room, and a student would fall out of his chair. What was the matter with these kids? Didn't they know how important it was to get an education? Hadn't they made the connection between school and their own futures? Why couldn't they exercise a little self-control? Then one day while on recess duty with another teacher, I watched a group of students pushing, shoving, and shrieking at each other over whose turn it was to play with the ball. The teacher rolled her eyes with disgust and said, "Look at them. They are so immature. What makes them behave so childishly?" I gave a non-committal grunt, but to myself I thought, maybe it's because they are children, and maybe we adults need to be more understanding of how real children behave. When I met Jane in the teacher's lounge, I told her about my big insight at recess. Jane shook her head. "What you're seeing is more than just childish behavior. Some of these kids are dealing with problems we never dreamed of when we were growing up. I have youngsters in my class who hardly ever see their parents. They're high-powered professionals consumed by their careers and desperately trying to do it all. I have other kids whose parents can't be home, because they're holding down a day job and a night job just to survive. Ken has a child who has been in 2 foster homes and 3 different schools in 1 year. And you told me you have a boy who lives in a homeless shelter. Not only are these children coping with all the normal problems of growing up, but many of them haven't had a chance to be children." Jane paused here and sighed. The sad truth is that in today's world, kids are being subjected to unprecedented stress and neglect. If we're to have any hope of helping them master their academic skills, we have to help them unpack some of the emotional baggage they carry into our classrooms. That means our role as teacher has to change to include many elements of parenting. I suspected Jane was right. Although some of my kids came to school ready and eager to learn, others seemed distracted and needful. Maybe that explained why they ignored or resisted my simplest request. Whatever was going on at home continued to drive their behavior in school. In a way it almost made sense. When Sam asked his mother if he could read his composition to her, she told him to leave her alone. Her boyfriend had just walked out on her. Melissa, whose widowed father was an alcoholic, was being raised by a teenage babysitter in a television set. She had no idea how to interact with adults. Eric's mother was chronically depressed. What would any of these children know about cooperation? They certainly weren't learning it from their families. Obviously I couldn't change what was happening in their homes. But maybe I could change what was happening in school. As I thought about my teaching style, I had to admit that sometimes I sounded like a drill sergeant barking orders. Sharpen your pencil. Raise your hand. Put your name on your test. Stay in your seat. Get out your books. Keep your eyes on your own paper. Get in line. Lower your voice. Get rid of your gum. Be careful with the computer. Not only was I telling the children what to do, but I was also telling them what not to do. Don't run in the hall. Don't shove. Don't be rude. Don't hit. Don't forget your homework. Don't write on your desk. Don't talk. Don't cheat. Don't put your feet in the aisle. Don't tease the gerbil. Instead of teaching content, I was spending most of my time trying to control my out-of-control students. But if I didn't, how would they ever learn to behave in a civilized way? And yet it seemed that the more orders I gave, the more resistant they became. Precious class time was lost dealing with defiance and power struggles. On especially tough days I went home with my patience spent, my energy drained, and my strength sapped. I felt like the joke that says, I have one nerve left, and you're on it. I went back to my copy of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and reread the chapter, Engaging Cooperation. All the examples took place in the home. What would happen if I substituted school examples? I jotted down my revisions of one of the exercises and brought them to school the next day to share with my colleagues at lunch. As they were drinking their coffee, I said, "Okay, gang. Let's play school one more time. I'm the teacher, you're my students. As you listen to me, ask yourself, what did this teacher's words make me think or feel? Then give me your uncensored reactions." "No way," said Ken, putting out his hand for my paper. "I was the guinea pig last time. How about letting me be the teacher and you all react to me?" We agreed. What follows are the statements that Ken read and the reactions of the students Maria, Jane, and I. Teacher, blaming and accusing, "You forgot your pencil again? What did you think you were going to write with? Now we have to stop class, waste everybody's time, and find you a pencil." Students' reactions, "I feel humiliated. I never do anything right. The teacher is mean." Teacher, calling names, "You have to be pretty stupid to turn in an assignment and not bother to write your name on it." Students' reactions, "I hate you. Everything I do is wrong. I guess I am stupid." Teacher, threatening, "If I see one more spitwad, I'll pull you out of class so fast, your head will spin. And if this behavior continues, you're going to be suspended." Students' reactions, "I don't believe you. I don't care. I'm scared." Teacher, giving orders, "Stop that talking. Put away your notebook. Get in a straight line. Now. Hurry up." Students' reactions, "I'm not your slave. I'll do it, but slowly. How do you get out of this prison?" Teacher, lecturing and moralizing, "It wasn't nice to break John's pen. How would you like it if someone broke your pen? If someone lets you borrow something, you need to take good care of it, just as you would want him to take good care of your things. Now don't you think you owe John an apology?" "I do." Students' reactions, "I must be a bad person. Blah, blah, blah." I stopped listening. Teacher, warning, "Watch those test tubes. They'll break and you'll get cut. Careful with that Bunsen burner. Do you want to have an accident?" Students' reactions, "I'm afraid I'd better not try to do anything." "You're wrong. Nothing will happen." Teacher, playing the martyr, "I go home every night with a headache. Because of you kids. Do you see these gray hairs? There is a gray hair for each one of you." Students' reactions, "I'll buy you a bottle of hair dye. I wish I was out of here. I don't need this grief. It's my fault." Teacher, comparing, "Why is your report late? I had your sister, Sally, last year and she always handed in her work on time." Students' reactions, "I'll never be as good as Sally. I hate my sister. I hate my teacher." Teacher, being sarcastic, "No one remembers the year Columbus discovered America? Brilliant. This must be a magnet school for the dysfunctional. The only way to raise this class's IQ is if you all stand on chairs." Students' reactions, "I'm stupid. I can't remember anything. This must be a magnet school. Look at the dysfunctional teacher we've attracted. Go to hell." Teacher, prophesying, "With your work habits, you'll never be able to hold a job. And if you can't get any better grades than this, no decent college is going to want you." Students' reactions, "It's no use. I'm no good. Why try? I give up." We stared at each other when the exercise was over. Jane voiced what was in our minds, if we experience such anger and despair when we're just pretending to be students, what must real students feel? Especially if they hear that kind of talk at home, too, Maria added. "My sister is always telling her children, if your grades don't improve, I'm taking away television. You should study the way your brother does. Maybe you'd get A's, too. You don't do your work because you're lazy." She's always after her kids and their father is always lecturing them. "My father's specialty was sarcasm," Jane said. "I suppose he thought he was being funny or clever. He'd say, "Lost your library book?" Well, that was a responsible thing to do. When I was young that would confuse me. I'd think, how could losing something be responsible? As I grew older, his sarcasm really hurt me and I found myself wanting to answer him back. Sarcastically. Sometimes I did. Unfortunately I got to be very good at it. When I first started teaching, words would just pop out of my mouth. Especially when I was frustrated. I remember saying to one dawdling kid what my father had said to me 1,000 times, "Are you naturally slow? Or is someone helping you?" The whole class cracked up. "And that laughter," said Ken, "is music to a teacher's ears and what spurs us on to even greater heights of sarcasm." "I know," Jane said solemnly. "But right underneath all the laughter is a kid who's being ripped up publicly. I don't do it anymore." "How did you stop yourself?" Maria asked. Jane grimaced. "I take no pleasure in telling this. In my second year of teaching I had a particularly irritating girl in my class. In the middle of a lesson Teresa would think nothing of pulling out a mirror and fussing with her hair. One day I was questioning the kids about a reading assignment on ancient Egypt. Not a hand was raised. Then I spotted Teresa filing her nails. That did it. I said, "Well, I'm not going to call on Teresa for an answer. She makes so many contributions to class discussions, we have to give someone else a chance." A few kids snickered, but to my utter amazement, Teresa looked up from her nails and beamed at me. She thought I meant it. My compliment had thrilled her. I was so ashamed that I said to myself, never again. If I want to show my disapproval to a kid, I need to do it in a straightforward manner. If I want to be funny, I need to make sure that it isn't at a child's expense. "Okay," said Ken, "so a lot of the things we normally say to kids either make them feel bad about themselves or bad about us. But the fact remains. It's still our job to see to it that they behave themselves." "That's right," Maria added. "What should a teacher do instead outside of trying to be nice and saying, 'Please do this' or 'Please don't do that'?" "Aha," I said, taking out my copy of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and waving it in the air. "The answer lies within." I opened to the chapter Engaging Cooperation and showed the cartoons to Ken and Maria. Ken studied the drawings. "These are all home examples," he said. "Yes," said Maria, "but kids are kids, no matter where they are, at home or at school. I don't think there's much difference." "I think there's a big difference," said Ken, "between one or two parents dealing with one or two children and one teacher trying to control 30 kids at the same time." "It's true. In that way the teacher's job is harder," Jane agreed. "In other ways the parent's job is harder. Theirs is a lifelong commitment. They can't dismiss their own kids at 3 o'clock. Or hope they'll get new ones in the fall. Nevertheless, whether you're in the living room or the classroom, the same skills can be very useful and very effective." For the rest of the lunch period, we all worked together at transposing the principles of engaging cooperation to the school setting. Here, in cartoon form, are the examples we came up with. Describe the problem. When teachers describe the problem, instead of accusing or giving commands, students are more willing to behave responsibly. Give information. When teachers give information, without insult, students are more likely to change their behavior. Offer a choice. Threats and orders can cause students to feel helpless or defiant. Choice opens doors to new possibilities. Say it with a word or gesture. Students dislike listening to lectures or long explanations. A single word or gesture encourages them to think about the problem and figure out what needs to be done. Describe what you feel. Make no reference to the student's character. When teachers describe their feelings without attack or ridicule, students can listen and respond responsibly. Put it in writing. Students often shut out adult talk, but if they see something in writing, they get the message. The sign below was placed on a dirty rabbit cage. This note was posted on the assignment box by a teacher who was tired of giving constant verbal reminders. A teacher sent this note to a student who was late handing in her term paper. We were pleased with ourselves. The examples we had worked out together looked very doable on paper. Now, the real trick I said, is to put all of these wonderful ideas into action in the classroom. It may surprise you to learn, said Ken, that on my better days I actually do some of this stuff naturally with the kids. I'm always telling them, your feet, the door, your reports, only I never knew before today that I was being skillful. And there's something else I do that's not on the list. We left something out. I asked. Yeah, fun. Play. A little humor. Anything to liven things up. I do it as much for myself as for the kids. A little joke is good, Maria commented. Marco loves his biology class because his teacher always makes jokes. And it's true. On open school night, the teacher told the parents that there's such a shortage of money that the first period class may have to stitch up the frogs so that the second period class can dissect them. Ken laughed heartily. That's what I mean, he said. Humor puts everyone in a good mood and makes the kids want to cooperate. I was curious. What exactly is it that you do, Ken? Give me one example. Okay, he said, fire drills. You know kids never take them seriously and how hard it is to get them out of the room. But if I do my Navy command routine, we're the first class out on the street. Your what routine? We asked. Ken rolled a piece of loose leaf paper into the shape of a megaphone and held it to his mouth. Now hear this, he intoned. This is a drill. This is a fire drill. Man your stations. Carry out your assignments. All hands on deck. On the double. It's amazing how quick kids are to respond to anything that's a little playful, Jane said. I remember when I taught first grade, it was always a battle to get everyone to line up to go anywhere. Then one afternoon I said, children, let's make a train to go to recess. 1, you come up front and be the engine, Monica, you go to the end and be the caboose, and all the rest of you will be freight cars in between. Now hook up to each other's shoulders. And let's go. In less than a minute they formed a perfect line and chugged on out the door all smiles. But you'd only do that with little kids, right? Maria said. That's what I used to think. Jane exclaimed. So when I was assigned to a 4th grade class the next year, I thought they were too old for that sort of thing. Then one day I got a complaint from the teacher next door about how noisy my kids were on the way to the lunchroom. Instead of scolding, I told them very seriously to take their magic keys out of their pockets, lock their mouths, and hand me their keys before they walked out the door. And they did it. Maria asked. Each one came up to me and put a key into my hand. Then they all walked tight-lipped and grinning until we reached the lunchroom. Then one at a time, I handed them back their keys so they could unlock their mouths to talk and eat. Do your own children know how lucky they are to have you for a mother? I said to Jane. You must be so much fun to live with. Jane smiled weakly. My kids wouldn't agree with you, she said as she gathered her things to return to class. By the time I get home from school, there's not much left of me. All I want is peace and quiet. And you'll have it, Ken said, walking out with Jane, when your kids grow up and leave home. That conversation took place on a Friday. On Monday Jane set her tray down on the lunch table and beamed at all of us. What's up? Ken asked. I'm very proud of myself, Jane announced. Remember what we talked about on Friday? Well, when I got home that afternoon, my kids were in the kitchen having their after-school snack, and there were books and sneakers. And banana peels all over the table and crumbs all over the floor. Did I threaten? Did I call anyone a name? Did I lecture them? I did not. Jane paused here dramatically and pointed to Ken. Instead, I used your idea, she said, of speaking as if I were another character. Ken looked bewildered. Another character? Actually, Jane said, I tried a number of different characters. The kids loved it. And my husband got such a kick out of it, he came up with a few characters of his own. Give us a sample, said Ken. Here? Now? I'd be too embarrassed. It didn't take too much urging on our parts. Soon Jane was entertaining us with her impersonations. Here, in cartoon form, are the characters Jane and her husband created for their own amusement and that of their children. Instead of scolding, try using another voice or accent. Maria couldn't stop smiling. What you did was very funny, she said. And I know if I pretended with my children that way, they would probably clean up, too. But I would feel foolish. That's not the kind of person I am. I'm more serious. Maybe too serious. I don't know about that, Jane said. I think we all have a playful part of us locked away somewhere. We just need to locate it and let it out. Look. What you did with Anna Ruth the other morning. Maria looked puzzled. When you had that big fight before she left for school. Maria blushed. Oh, that was nothing. Trust me, Jane said. It was something. Tell them all what happened. Please. Maria hesitated a moment. Well, Anna Ruth and I had this bad argument. Right before the bus was coming. I could see how much it upset her to leave. Before we made up. I knew she wanted to kiss me but also that she didn't want to. So I asked her if I could have a kiss. She said, no. I asked her if I could have a kiss when she came home from school. She said, no. So I asked her if I could have a kiss when she got married. She laughed and said, oh, Mom, and gave me a hug and a kiss and we both felt better. At the end of the lunch period I found myself feeling strangely elated as I climbed the stairs to my classroom. I was touched by Maria's story. Imagine being playful at such a tense moment, and charmed by the crazy characters Jane and her husband had invented. It sounded like such fun to try something different, to do the unexpected. I thought about the rambunctious kids in my class who continually called out their answers without raising their hands. I had tried many of my new skills with them, but never humor. I had described the problem. I hear answers, but I don't see hands. That worked with some of the children. I told them what I felt. It frustrates me when everyone calls out at once and I wind up hearing no one. A few more responded appropriately. To the holdouts I offered a choice. You can raise your left hand or your right hand. Some chose right, some chose left, one put up both hands. When anyone slipped, I reminded him or her with a single word, hands. I congratulated myself on having the situation pretty much under control. But Andrew continued to elude me. The words flew out of his mouth before he could think to get his hand up. Nothing I said seemed to make any impression upon his irrepressible nature. Suddenly I had an inspiration. I stopped on the staircase, took out my pad, and wrote, Dear Andrew. When you want to show you understand. Don't call out. Just raise your hand. Thanks in advance. Ms. Lander. Halfway through my social studies lesson I asked the class about the causes of the Revolutionary War. Hands were waving all over the room and one voice called out, taxation without representation. It was Andrew, of course. I walked over to his desk, smiled pleasantly at him, and handed him my folded note. He opened it, smiled back at me, and raised his hand for the rest of the period. The next morning he said he had a poem for me. I read it and asked him to write it on the board as a general reminder to the whole class. In large letters Andrew printed. Roses are red. Lettuce is green. If you raise your hand, it will be seen. I never had to say another word about not calling out after that. I'd simply point to Andrew's poem. A quick reminder. Engaging cooperation. At home and in school. Adult, who's responsible for the mess on this floor? Instead of questioning and criticizing, you can 1. Describe the problem. I see wet paint all over the floor. 2. Give information. It's easier to remove paint before it dries. 3. Offer a choice. You can clean it up with a wet rag or a damp sponge. 4. Say it with a word or gesture. The paint. 5. Describe what you feel. I don't like seeing the floor splattered with paint. 6. Put it in writing. Attention all artists. Kindly restore floor to original condition before leaving the room. Thank you. The management. 7. Be playful, use another voice or accent. In country and western style sing. I see paint there on the floor. And it's a sight I do deplore. Get out your mop and rags galore. And help to do this little chore. Questions and stories. From parents and teachers. Questions from parents. One isn't how you say something as important as what you say? Your tone of voice is easily as important as your words. The most skilled response can be toxic when delivered with a sigh of disgust that implies, "You've done it again. You'll never learn." Along with our words of respect, we need an attitude of respect, one that signals, "I have confidence in your ability and your judgment. Once I point out the problem, you'll know what to do." The other day my daughter came crying to me because one of her brothers had torn out some pages from her new notebook. I asked both boys who did it and they both denied it. How can I get them to tell the truth? The question "who did it" sets off an instant alarm within children. They're now faced with two unpleasant alternatives. If they lie and get away with it, they'll have short-term relief but long-term guilt. If they tell the truth, they can expect a scolding or possibly a punishment. Worse yet, their confession may bring on an even more threatening question: why did you do it? No matter how a child tries to justify his actions, he feels the real answer to why he committed his crime is a litany of self-incrimination: because I'm dumb, mean, self-centered, inconsiderate, and thoughtless. Rather than ask children who did what or why they did it, state the problem. Susie is very upset. Some pages were torn from her new notebook. Follow that with information: if anyone in this family runs out of paper, ask me and I'll help you find some. 3. Whenever I want my daughter to do something, I try to ask her politely. I'll say, "Please hurry or you'll be late for school," or "Please turn off the TV and start your book report now," but she ignores me. What would you advise? Adults often use please to soften the impact of a direct order. Children often tune out the please and rebel against the order. That, in turn, infuriates most parents. What is worse, some children use the please formula to make their own demands. "Mom, you have to take me to the store now, please." I said please, didn't I? Since there are so many other options for engaging cooperation, see the quick reminder on page 83. We suggest you save please for a situation in which you have little emotional investment and merely wish to model a common courtesy. For example, "Please pass the bread." At what age do you recommend parents start writing notes to their children? Surprisingly enough, the written word can be very effective for children who are too young to read. A mother told us that her daughter took forever to get ready for preschool in the morning. One afternoon the mother sat down with her and listed all the things that had to be done before leaving the house. Next to the words for each task, brush teeth, comb hair, eat breakfast, etc., she drew a simple picture. From then on the little girl consulted her list every morning to help herself get ready for school. Then, one day she proudly covered the pictures with one hand and read her entire list to her daddy. 5. When my son carried on about how he wasn't going to make a stupid speech even if his teacher failed him, I told him that he had to, and gave him a choice. He could practice it in front of his mirror or in front of me. He refused to do either. Any suggestions? When a youngster has strong negative feelings about doing something, he can experience a choice as manipulation or entrapment. Before he can even begin to entertain the options you offer, he needs to know that you understand his resistance. For example, the thought of standing up in front of an audience and giving a speech can be very scary. Even professionals get nervous. What do you think would make you feel more relaxed or confident? Practicing your talk in front of a mirror? Trying it out on the family? Your choices might even lead your son to come up with a third option. Maybe I'll say it into my tape recorder and play it back until I know it. By being on his side and acknowledging the difficulty of his task, you make it possible for him to hear your choices and to consider them. Stories from parents. This first example shows a father using his new skills to help his teenage son live more cooperatively with a foreign exchange student who was spending the year with them. My son, Jack, was doing his homework and listening to his favorite rock station. I could see that Andre, our foreign exchange student from France, was having a hard time concentrating on his homework but was too polite to say anything. He just kept looking in the direction of the radio. I was infuriated by my son's insensitivity. I was about to ask him how he Expected Andre to work with all that noise, but then I thought that maybe I'd be better off just giving him information. I said, Jack, some people can do homework with loud music. Others need quiet to be able to think. Jack looked up, turned the radio down slightly, and asked Andre, is this okay? About a half hour later, I heard the volume creeping up again. I poked my head into the boys' room and yelled, the music. Jack said, oh, sorry, and turned it off. Andre said, merci. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This story was from a mother who said she relied heavily upon play to engage the cooperation of her 3-year-old daughter, Mindy. Mindy was about to get into the wading pool with her library book. I was too far away to stop her, so I yelled, oh, no. Book, stop. Book, you can't get in the pool. Books can't swim. Mindy stopped in her tracks, looked at the book in her hand, and quickly ran it back to the house. A second later, she was out again and into the pool. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. These next 2 stories illustrate the power of the written word. Andy, my 10-year-old, begged me to lend him my best casserole dish for the International Food Fair at school. When the fair was over, he neglected to bring it back. I reminded him every day for a week to bring it home, but he never did. Finally I took a felt marker and wrote casserole on the banana I packed for his lunch. Later that afternoon he told me all the kids laughed when he took out his banana. But he still forgot to bring the thing home. I said, Andy, this calls for strong measures. You need to write the kind of note to yourself that will get the job done. He sat right down and wrote, Dear Andy, remember to bring home the stupid, stinky, smelly, dirty, dumb casserole tomorrow or else. I didn't correct his spelling. He taped the note on his book bag, and the next afternoon I had my casserole dish back. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. My dog was at the window, barking. I looked out and saw my children and the neighbors' children fighting at the bus stop, shouting and punching and kicking each other. I was still in my bathrobe, so I quickly wrote stop fighting on a large piece of paper and tied it with a string to the dog's collar. Then I let her out, hoping she would go to the children. She did, barking furiously. When the children saw the dog and read the note, they seemed stunned. They looked around, totally amazed. And they stopped fighting. Questions from teachers. 1. What happens if I describe the problem and my student doesn't respond? The other day I said to my first grader, Jim, your foot is in the aisle. He looked up, said, oh, and did nothing about it. I didn't know what to do after that. You can always repeat your original statement. If that yields no results, go on to give information. Someone could trip over it. Some children need to hear things more than once or in more than one way. 2. I'm wondering whether the idea of giving information works with teenagers. We were doing collage in my art class, and I said to one girl, Sheila, paste dries out when it isn't covered. She rolled her eyes and said, no kidding. Why would she react like that? Information needs to be age appropriate. If you tell a teenager something she already knows, she experiences it as an insult to her intelligence. Sheila just needs the gentlest, swiftest reminder, Sheila, the paste. 3. What's the difference between a one-word statement and giving a command? If I say, sit, isn't that the same as giving an order? If you use a verb as your single word, stop, stand, move, sit, it will indeed sound like an order. A one-word statement works best when it's a noun. Laurie, your seat, causes Laurie to think, what about my seat? Oh, I'm supposed to be in it. I'd better sit down. You're not telling Laurie what to do. You're directing her attention to the problem so that she can tell herself what to do. 4. I thought a choice was supposed to engage cooperation. I have 2 girls in my class who never stop talking. I told them, you have a choice, either you stop that chattering or I'm changing your seats. Well, they didn't stop chattering, and when I finally did change their seats, they complained bitterly that I was unfair. What went wrong? Your choice sounded too much like a threat. As soon as we say either, you do this for me or I'll do that to you, the child will feel trapped and hostile. Before offering an unappealing choice, it's a good idea to acknowledge your student's feelings. You could say something like it's hard to sit near a good friend and not talk. There's so much you want to say to each other. Then when you offer a choice, let it be one that makes the students feel you're on their side. So, girls, what would be easier for you? To sit next to each other and restrain yourselves? Or to change seats so you won't be tempted? Talk it over after school and tomorrow let me know what you've decided. 5. I think I could be comfortable expressing my real feelings to most of my students, and they probably would respond appropriately. But I have a few very tough customers in my class. Suppose I say, it upsets me to see books on the floor, and one of them yells out, "Who cares?" What do I do then? It may help if you tell yourself that your student's words are probably not aimed at you personally. Chances are he's either using you as a target for his displaced hostility or simply repeating in class what he hears at home. You can tell your tough customer, I care about how I feel. I care about how you feel. And I expect this to be a class where we all care about each other's feelings. Stories from teachers. A third-grade teacher told how helpful it was to one of her students when she gave him information instead of a scolding. Max came in before recess was over, looking agitated. I said, "Max, you seem upset." He said, "What's pro puree?" I said, "Potpourri." He said, "Yeah," and handed me a referral slip from the recess supervisor. She yelled at me, he said, because I wasn't being pro puree. I unfolded the referral slip and read it aloud. "I caught this boy spitting on the playground. I am taking away his recess privileges today, because his behavior is not appropriate." Max said, "See, she said I wasn't pro puree." "What is that?" "What she wanted you to know," I explained, "is that what you did wasn't appropriate. That means that it's not okay to spit on the playground." Max looked confused. I said, "Max, spitting spreads germs." He said, "Oh. And that was it." He never did it again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The principal of a private school told what happened when he acknowledged the feelings of a defiant student and offered him a choice. As the principal, I'm often called upon to play the heavy. Yesterday one of my teachers sent a message to my office asking me to please come out and do something about Tommy, who refused to come in from recess. I wondered what in the world I could do short of carrying him in. When I came out, I saw Tommy hunkered down with a red-faced teacher standing over him yelling, "I told you I was going to call the principal." I took a deep breath and said, "Hello, Tommy. Seems to me you're having a hard time leaving this playground. And no wonder. It's such a nice spring day." Tommy said nothing and continued to stare at the ground. I said, "You probably wish you could stay out for the rest of the morning. Well, son, it's time to get back to class now. So what do you say? Should we go in this door or that door?" Tommy pointed to the door that was farthest away and said, "That one." I extended my hand. He took it and we walked back into the building together. I don't know who was more surprised, me or the teacher. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. A junior high school teacher reported how she found a way to tap into her students' spirit of play in order to teach a potentially dull subject. My language arts class was bored with my lesson on linking verbs and frankly I was, too. When I went home, I knew I needed to think of some way to liven things up or I'd spend another day yelling at them to stop talking and pay attention. I fooled around with the idea of writing a rap song, but could only come up with the first 2 lines. The next morning I told the kids what I'd done and recited my opening lines. Everyone became excited. We spent the rest of the period working on the lyrics and by the time the bell rang we had the whole song. The students left the room singing it, they taught it to their friends, they sang it on the bus coming to school the next day, and they all did astonishingly well on their tests. Here's the linking verb rap, written by the students of Section 72 in Welsh Roanoke Junior High School in Louisiana. Yo! I have a little something to teach to you. It's the linking verb rap. And it's easy to do. A linking verb connects a subject with a noun. And if you've done it right, you can turn it around. An adjective can be in the predicate part. Know what you're doing. Then you'll be smart. Look very carefully. And you will see. Most of the verbs are forms of be. Am, is, are, was, were. These are the past and present of the verb. Learn, seem, appear, and become. Then you will know that you are done. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This final story was from a 6th grade homeroom teacher who told us how she used the written word to stop a child from being teased by her peers. The day Sarah was transferred to my class, I knew there was going to be a problem. The second she walked through the door with her sad, moon face and overweight body, Margie, the leader of the in-group, smirked and rolled her eyes at her faithful followers. They all tittered, and Sarah's face turned flame red. That was only the beginning. Later that week I received reports from the gym teacher that Margie didn't want Sarah on her team because she was too fat. I heard from the lunchroom aides that Margie called out, "Here comes the human garbage pail," when Sarah passed by with her tray. The home economics teacher told me that someone called Sarah the blob. I was outraged. I knew that not only was Margie the instigator, but she was constantly egging on her sidekicks. I considered speaking to her directly but didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. Finally I decided to write to Margie. It took me many drafts to get the tone I wanted. In my early versions, I went on and on about how angered and disgusted I was by her cruelty. Here's what I finally typed and gave to her. Dear Margie, I need your help. As you must have noticed, Sarah has been put down and ridiculed every day since she was transferred to our class. School must be very difficult for her. You may be wondering why I've chosen to write to you. It's because I've seen your leadership qualities and the respect your friends have for you. I'm guessing that if you made it clear to them that a person's weight is not a measure of her worth, the teasing and hurtful jokes would stop. I know this letter asks a great deal of you, but I have confidence that somehow you'll find a way to make Sarah's school day a happier experience. Sincerely, Ms. G. Margie never referred to the letter. But over the next few days the smirks and snide remarks slowly came to a halt. One of the girls asked Sarah if she wanted to help build scenery for the class play, and Margie 3. The pitfalls of punishment. Alternatives that lead to self-discipline. Mark stomped in from recess yelling and swinging his fists. Once again a heated soccer game had set him off. He came at his teacher with a flood of accusations. Mark, Jason cheats. They said it was my fault, but it wasn't. It was Jason's. He kicked the ball out, not me. Mrs. Kenner made me sit on the bench for fighting, but I didn't start it. Jason did. Now Tom won't let me play on his team. I hate this school. Teacher, that's enough. I've just about had it with you, Mark. You wonder why nobody wants to play with you when you come in here acting like a crybaby. Kids don't want to play with people who blame their problems on everybody else. Mark, but. Teacher, no buts. I don't want to hear it. I've had enough of your excuses. Mark, but I didn't. Teacher, I don't want to hear one more word out of you. Next recess you are going to sit in the kindergarten room and think about how to act your age. I was that teacher. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I knew I should have been more patient. But I had spoken to Mark about his immature behavior many times before, and my little talks never seemed to do any good. For the rest of the day I couldn't stop thinking about Mark. What had I hoped to accomplish with him? Did my punishment reduce his agitation? No. Did it open a line of communication between us? Obviously not. Did it help him to resolve his problem? Again, no. Mark wasn't going to learn how to play with kids his own age by sitting in a room full of kindergartners. Then what drove me to punish him? That's what I asked Jane as we walked down the hall together to the faculty meeting. As she paused to consider my question, I answered it myself. I was mad and frustrated and didn't know how else to get through to him. There's something else, Jane said. Punishment feels familiar. I don't know about you, but I grew up hearing if you do this once more, you'll be punished, or do you're getting exactly what you deserve? And how about I'm doing this for your own good? I added. Jane smiled ruefully. That, too. It was the way grown-ups taught a child a lesson. Right. But, Jane, I can still remember how I felt when I was a child and heard those words. I can assure you I didn't learn any lesson. I didn't think about how I could do better in the future. I just remember feeling angry and having fantasies of revenge. I'll fix them. I'll get back at them. I'll do it again, only next time I won't get caught. Now I'm the grown-up, trying to teach Mark a lesson, and he's probably having the same reactions I did. And if that's true, said Jane, if punishment leaves kids feeling hostile and vengeful, why do we parents and teachers continue to do it? Ken caught up to us. I heard that, he said cheerfully, holding open the door to the library, where our meeting was being held. It's because there are 30 of them and one of us, and if we didn't punish, they'd run all over us. Get serious, Ken, I said. I am serious. How else do you enforce the rules? Sometimes you have to punish kids to teach them a lesson. We were back to that again. But, Ken, I tried to explain as we walked over to a table in the corner, if punishment teaches a lesson, what are students learning? When a child is punished verbally, I want you to write, I must not cheat, 100 times. He probably tells himself, I'm no good. I deserve to be punished. And, Jane chimed in, when a child is punished physically, the paddle in the principal's office will change your mind about fighting. He learns. It's okay for you to hit me, but it's not okay for me to hit, until I'm the one in charge. Ken looked at both of us coolly. I give my students plenty of room, he said, and as you know, I don't object to having fun. But there is such a thing as limits. If I hear profanity or backtalk or see disruptive behavior, they get punished. Then without another word he reached up to the shelves behind our table, which held the professional books in our library, and pulled out a few of them. Listen to this, he said as he thumbed through them quickly. Here are the words of some of the top educators in the field today who share my philosophy. Punishment is often rapidly effective in the treatment of harmful behaviors. 1. In lieu of the ineffectiveness of other tried alternatives, punishment may be a better solution than others. 2. Not using punishment withholds a potentially effective treatment. 3. Here, Ken said, sliding the books across the table. See for yourself. All written recently. I don't care when they were written, Jane snorted. The thinking is archaic. Besides, you've quoted these people out of context. And what's more, there's another school of thought of which you may not be aware that takes a very different position. Then she proceeded to pull 4 books from the shelf and started turning pages furiously. Jane, I said, maybe you ought to wait until after the meeting. It's okay, said Ken. People are still coming in. Besides, I want to hear this. Here we go, Jane said. These are the thoughts of some authorities who believe that punishment is not an effective form of discipline. Dr. Haim G. Jinot says, punishment does not deter misconduct. It merely makes the offender more cautious in committing his crime, more adroit in concealing his traces, more skillful in escaping detection. When a child is punished, he resolves to be more careful, not more honest and responsible. 4. Dr. Irwin A. Hyman says, the use of corporal punishment teaches children that violence is the way to solve problems. Research shows that this message is taught to those who inflict the pain, to those who receive it, and to those who witness it. It does not help children develop the internal controls that are necessary in a democracy. 5. Dr. Rudolf Dreikurs says, today parents and teachers no longer can make the child behave. Reality demands that we apply new methods to influence and to motivate children to cooperate. Punishment such as spanking, slapping, humiliating, depriving, and generally putting children down are outdated and ineffective means of disciplining children. 6. Dr. Albert Bandura says, punishment can control misbehavior, but by itself it will not teach desirable behavior or even reduce the desire to misbehave. 7. Ken shrugged and launched into a long counter-argument, but all I could think about were the last words Jane had read, reduce the desire to misbehave. That was exactly what I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to know how to reach inside my students and turn that desire to misbehave into a desire to behave appropriately. I wanted to avoid the terrible fallout of punishment and encourage the children to be inner-directed and self-disciplined. I wanted to find some effective alternatives to punishment. As the guidance counselor distributed some new forms for us to fill out, I whispered to Jane, maybe instead of threatening to send Mark to kindergarten, I should have acknowledged how angry he was and, when he calmed down, helped him think about what else he could do when he felt he was being treated unfairly. He didn't deserve to be punished. Ken leaned over and said, but how about a student who does? He had me there. My thoughts turned to Amy, the girl who had the lead in the school play I was directing for Parents' Night. I had to admit she was one kid I itched to punish. In the parking lot after the meeting I told Jane about Amy and how furious she'd made me, and how I had chosen her for the part because she was outstanding during tryouts but how at rehearsals she was obnoxious. She'll do anything and everything to draw attention to herself, giggles, primps, fools around, and as far as learning her lines is concerned, forget it. That's for the peasants. Princess Amy can't be bothered to bring her script. I think she believes she can learn her entire part at the last minute. And maybe she can, but I have this awful picture in my head of Parents' Night with Amy standing center stage, looking blank and glassy-eyed, and me in the wings, feeding her lines in a loud stage whisper. What would you like to do to her? Jane asked. Give me your worst punishment fantasy. I can't. It's too mean. Indulge yourself. I'd like to sick Mrs. Kane on her. Who's she? My 5th grade teacher. She was one tough cookie, never let anybody get away with anything. Okay, so what would Mrs. Kane do to Amy? Come on, Liz, at least you'll get it out of your system. Then we'll be very professional and see if we can figure out some reasonable alternatives. On the following pages, in cartoon form, you'll see my punishment fantasy and all the possibilities we considered using instead. My punishment fantasy. Alternatives to punishment. And if Amy still doesn't cooperate? Offer a choice. But suppose Amy still makes no effort to learn her lines. Let her experience the consequences of her behavior. What actually happened? I never had to take that final drastic step. Just knowing that I had so many different options sent me back to the next rehearsal with a completely different attitude. There would be no blame or warnings or dire threats. When I took Amy aside and told her how I felt and described how she could get back on track, she listened quietly. At the next rehearsal I noticed a change in her behavior. By the end of the week she had learned all of her lines. The following Monday at lunch I told Jane, Ken, and Maria about my small triumph. Ken challenged me immediately. But what if she hadn't learned her lines? What if you had to let her experience the consequences of her behavior and dropped her from the cast? How different is that from punishment? I was taken aback by his questions. How could I find the words that would make clear to him what was just becoming clear to me? It was my intent. That was different, I said slowly. My intent was not to hurt her or to deprive her or to get back at her. It wasn't even to teach her a lesson. It was to protect the cast and to make sure that after all their work, they would have a reasonable shot at putting on a play they could feel proud of. And to protect me from unnecessary stress. Maria frowned. Still, the girl would be mad at you, she said. Jane came to my defense. That's possible, she said, but chances are she'd also be mad at herself. After the initial shock, she might say to herself, I'm very disappointed. I really wanted that part. If only I had learned my lines and not fooled around. Next time I'm in a play, I'll be more serious and more prepared. In other words, after doing her emotional homework, the hope is that Amy would grow from the experience. Maybe you're right, Maria sighed, but I don't know. I'm having trouble with Marco right now, and I feel pulled to both sides. My husband believes that when children do something wrong, they should be punished. But I don't like to punish, even though my parents punished us when we were children. Marco is giving you trouble? Ken asked incredulously. That doesn't sound like him. He's such a great kid. The day he came to school with you, before the term began, he helped me unpack all my books and set up my room. I know, he's a good boy, Maria said, but he did a bad thing. The other day he took out his ruler and started a pretend sword fight in the hall with Jimmy, this boy in his class. My husband always warns Marco not to be so wild, to think before he acts, but Marco never listens, and as a result I got a call from the teacher and then from the principal. Just for horsing around, Ken said. It was more serious than that. Jimmy's glasses got broken. Marco knocked them off and accidentally stepped on them. Then Jimmy's parents called my husband. They were very angry about the glasses. They said they were new, and they paid a lot of money for them, and it was Marco's fault for starting up. Well, that's another story, Ken said. If my kid did that, I would have punished him, too. So what do you say to that, Jane? I think, said Jane, that it's more important that we ask ourselves what Marco would say to himself if he were punished, and what Marco would say to himself if his parents tried to use an alternative to punishment. We all talked a great deal after that, trying to project what would happen in each scenario. On the next 2 pages you'll see the essence of how we imagined the dialogue might go if Marco's parents punished him, and if they didn't. Punishment. An alternative to punishment. Well, I have to admit there's a slight difference between the two approaches, Ken said. A slight difference? Jane exclaimed. In the first dialogue, where Marco is being punished, he's left feeling angry and helpless. And in the second dialogue, I said, Marco still gets his parents' strong disapproval, but he's also expected to make amends. And he's left feeling like a basically good person who, even if he did do something wrong, could find a way to make it right. Ken turned to Maria. So what are you going to do? He challenged her. Has all this talk helped you make up your mind? Maria looked at him solemnly. I know what I'm going to say to my husband tonight, she said quietly. And I know what we're both going to say to Marco. A quick reminder. Alternatives to punishment. At home and in school. Child, oh, hashtag, percent, asterisk, dollar, hashtag I can't do this math. Adult, I warned you over and over again not to use foul language. Now, you're going to be punished. Instead of threatening punishment, you can 1. Point out a way to be helpful. I hear your frustration. It would be helpful if you could express it without cursing. 2. Express your strong disapproval, without attacking character. That kind of language upsets me. 3. State your expectations. I expect you to find some other way to let me know how angry you are. 4. Show the child how to make amends. What I'd like to see is a list of some strong words you could use instead of the ones you just did. Try the dictionary or thesaurus if you need help. 5. Offer a choice. You can curse to yourself in your head, or you can use words that won't offend anyone. And if the child continues to use obscenities. 6. Let the child experience the consequences of his behavior. When I hear those words, I lose all desire to help you with math or anything else. Questions and stories. From parents and teachers. Questions from parents. 1. I've recently become a stepmother to 2 boys. My husband believes that if they fail a subject, they should have something deducted from their allowance. I think they should be given an increase in their allowance when they get good grades. Wouldn't rewarding them be a more positive way to get them to work harder? Strange as it may seem, studies show that both rewards and punishment, in the long run, actually reduce the desire to learn. 8. Children learn best when they care about mastering a subject. A child who receives a good grade already has his reward. All he might want from his parents is an acknowledgement of their pleasure in his achievement. A child who receives a failing grade has already had a punishing experience. What he needs is a parent who will empathize with his feelings of discouragement and then go on to help him to figure out what went wrong and what to do about it. 2. Whenever my daughter, Jill, comes home from preschool looking Unhappy, I know it's because the teacher has sent her to the timeout chair. The other night I was angry at my husband and Jill said, "Daddy, I think you'd better go to timeout." I was surprised because that's not a method I use with her at home. Now I'm beginning to wonder if it should be used in school. What do you think? Timeout has a very friendly, innocent sound. After all, the youngster isn't being hit or yelled at. She's just being stopped and removed from the scene. But even though some authorities in the field of childcare recommend the method highly, the National Association for the Education of Young Children includes timeout in its list of harmful disciplinary measures, right along with physical punishment, criticizing, blaming, and shaming. It's not hard to see why. As an adult, you can imagine how resentful and humiliated you would feel if someone forced you into isolation for something you said or did. However, it may be more difficult to imagine what goes on inside a child who is sent to do time in a timeout chair. Nevertheless, try it. Put yourself in the shoes of a 4 or 5-year-old. Imagine that you are so angry at a little boy in your class named Jeffrey, who either shoved you or called you a name or grabbed something from you, that in retaliation you either kick him or hit him or swear at him or throw something at him. Now imagine 2 different responses to your antisocial action from your teacher. In the first scenario, the teacher says, "Stop that. That is not a nice thing to do. You need to go to timeout right now." Chances are, as you slowly walk to your timeout chair, you might think, "The teacher isn't fair. She didn't see what Jeffrey did to me. It's all his fault. Or maybe I really am bad. So bad that I need to be sent away." In the second scenario, the teacher says to you, "You were so angry at Jeffrey that you kicked him. Kicking isn't allowed. Tell Jeffrey what you don't like with words. And you can." Chances are this time you'd say to yourself, "My teacher understands why I was mad at Jeffrey. She won't let me kick him, but she thinks I can tell him what I feel with words. Maybe I can." These are 2 very different sets of inner messages. The first convinces the child that there is something so wrong with her that she has to be removed from society. The second teaches her how to deal with society assertively and non-violently. Does that mean that there is never a time for a child to be separated from the group? Some teachers believe that every classroom should have a haven a child can retreat to in times of stress. This take a break place, or cool-off corner, can be equipped with some books, drawing materials, and pillows to punch or lie on. It's important that the child not be ordered to go there. Instead, the teacher could offer her a choice so that the youngster herself can determine whether or not she should go. "I can see you're still angry at Jeffrey. Do you want to tell me more about it, or do you want to use the paper and crayons in the cool-off corner to draw how you feel?" 3. For someone like me, with my temper, not spanking my son, but giving him timeout instead, is a big step forward. What else can you do when you feel you're about to lose control? One mother reported that she gives herself timeout when she is about to blow. She said, "When I saw my son mindlessly making scratch marks on the dining room table with the point of his new compass, I grabbed it away from him and said, 'I'm so angry at what I see, I'm going to my room to cool off.'" Later, when she calmed down, she showed her chastened son how to repair the damage. When Dr. Haim Ginott was challenged by a parent as to what he'd do if he were pushed over the edge, he drew himself up to his full height, glared at an imaginary little offender, raised his right arm in a threatening gesture, and bellowed, "I am so angry, I'm about to hit. So run for your life." For my son's teacher kept all the boys after school yesterday because the security guard told her that some of her students were smoking in the boys' bathroom. As a result, my son missed basketball practice and was very upset. He thinks group punishments are unfair. What do you think? It's not hard to understand your son's objection to group punishment. Innocent students resent it deeply and may conclude, "Why bother to follow the rules if I get punished anyway?" Those who are guilty may conclude, "I didn't get caught this time. Maybe I can get away with it again." If a teacher's goal is to help her students become self-disciplined, then punishment group or individual is not the answer. 5. My school district is in favor of corporal punishment and state law still allows it. Several parents, including myself, are concerned that slapping or spanking children is harmful. However, we don't know if it's possible to build a case against physical punishment in our school. Where can we find support for our point of view? You are not alone in your concerns. The following is only a partial list of organizations that favor outlawing corporal punishment in schools. American Academy of Pediatrics, American Bar Association, American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, Child Welfare League of America, NAACP, National PTA, National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse, National Association of School Psychologists, National Mental Health Association. Among the long list of countries that do not allow teachers to hit school children are England, Poland, Italy, Russia, China, France, Germany, Spain, the Scandinavian countries, Israel, Turkey, and Japan. The National Center for the Study of Corporal Punishment and Alternatives in the schools in Pennsylvania gives information and support to those who seek it. Their goal is to add the United States to the list of countries that have abolished corporal punishment. Stories from parents. This first experience was from the mother of 9-year-old Megan. I came home from work at 2 o'clock one afternoon because I didn't feel well. Imagine my shock when I heard children's laughter coming from my daughter's bedroom. I ran upstairs and there was Megan and her friend Joanne. They stopped laughing as soon as they saw me and looked at each other guiltily. I had a hard time getting it out of them, but they finally admitted that they came home for lunch and never returned to school. I said, "You mean you cut school?" Joanne said, "But we didn't do it on purpose. We were talking and we forgot to look at the clock." I told Joanne she'd better go home because I needed to speak to Megan privately. When her friend left, I said to Megan, very quietly, "You didn't forget to look at the clock." Megan lowered her head and said, "We were just experimenting to see what it would feel like not to go back to school." For the moment I didn't know what to do. I considered punishing her, telling her she couldn't have Joanne over for the next month. But instead I said, "I'm very upset by all this. When you're supposed to be in school, that's where I expect you to be. Now I'm probably going to get a phone call from your teacher." Megan said, "Write me an absence note. Say I was sick and then you won't get a call." I said, "Megan, the note has to come from you and it has to be the truth." Well, she wasn't very happy about that, but she did write a note, with a little help from me, saying she was just experimenting and that she wouldn't do it again. Afterward I felt good. I was firm, I didn't get crazy, and even though it turned out that the teacher gave her a hard time over the note, I still felt I did the right thing. I knew I had helped Megan face up to what she did and take responsibility. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This next story was from a parent of a high school student. My 16-year-old daughter, Carol, told me she was studying child development in her home economics class, and one day the teacher asked, "What do you think would happen to a child if he or she were never punished?" When Carol told the class that she had never been hit or punished by her parents, the other students looked at her with their mouths open. One of the girls said, but, you're good." I guess they couldn't believe that someone could turn out to be good without having been punished. I suppose if children were raised with spankings and punishments, it would be hard for them to understand that when parents trust kids and talk to them respectfully, the kids can end up being very good and very responsible people. To me, Carol is living proof of that. Only last week my husband and I returned from an evening out and found a note from her on our pillow. It said, "Dear Mom and Dad, tonight while backing out of the driveway I hit the oak tree and dented the fender of your car. Enclosed is $10. The first payment to cover the cost of repairs. Each month I'll pay a similar amount until it's all paid for. I'm really sorry. It was an accident. Love. Carol." I must admit we were a little angry at first, but after we cooled down, we were kind of proud. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This next experience was reported by a father. The superintendent called a meeting of all the parents to discuss the alarming increase in drug use in the district. A panel of mental health Professionals addressed us and they were all excellent, but the speaker who really got through to me was a dropout from our high school who had just been through a drug rehabilitation program. She told us about her alcoholic father who was never there for her, her mother who remarried and stopped paying attention to her, her long history of getting into trouble in school, acting tough, turning to drugs, and eventually living in the street and being terrified of getting AIDS, as a few of her friends had. At the end of her story, she looked around the room and said, "All I can say to you is please, listen to your children. I really think if my mom had listened to me more, instead of punishing me, I might have been able to listen to her. But instead, I just got angry about always being grounded and would defy her by sneaking out my bedroom window. If she'd been more my friend and less a punishing parent, it might have made a difference. All a kid's really got is her family. In the end, that's who's there for you. But you parents should listen more and judge less, so we can talk to you better." Stories from teachers. One I've taught in many schools and have witnessed all kinds of punitive practices, from sarcasm and ridicule to threats of detention or suspension. Some teachers deprive kids of what they enjoy most: sports, music, trips, etc. Others use a more physical approach. They'll slap, shake, pinch, or pull hair. Of all these practices, which would you say was the most harmful? In his book Reading, Writing, and the Hickory Stick, Dr. Erwin Hyman says that all of these punitive practices can leave a child with serious long-term after effects. His research shows that even one harsh experience can cause a variety of post-traumatic stress symptoms. The child may lose interest in schoolwork, stop doing homework, and start behaving aggressively. He may experience feelings of anxiety or depression, or a loss of trust in adults. Some children start bedwetting, nail biting, or stuttering, or suddenly develop headaches or stomach aches. Some experience nightmares or have trouble falling or staying asleep. Although one child might not experience all of these symptoms, no child should have to suffer any of them. Our children are entitled, if not by national law, then by a higher law, to be treated in humane and caring ways by those who claim the privilege of educating them. 2. I still can't accept the idea that there aren't some situations that call for punishment. How about a bully in the playground who grabs the glasses off a first grader, reduces him to tears, and laughs gleefully? Doesn't a child who behaves so cruelly deserve to be paddled? He needs to be stopped and redirected. He doesn't need another demonstration of how bigger, stronger people can hurt smaller, weaker people. Chances are the bully knows that all too well from personal experience. If we wish to teach kindness, we must use methods that are kind. A child who is cruel to another child needs to experience the strength of your convictions, not the pain of a paddle. He needs to hear a stern "I don't like what I see." No one should be teased to tears ever. He needs to hear your expectations of him. "I expect kindness from you. And you can start right now by returning the glasses." Respect for others can only be taught respectfully. 3. Are you suggesting that any student can be turned around by relating to him respectfully? Would that it were so. Sad to say, there are some children who have been so brutalized that they're unable to respond to caring ways. The short school day cannot begin to heal the long-term damage they have endured. The best that teachers can do is to protect the other students and themselves from these out-of-control children. However, it is especially important to use firm but respectful methods with these angry youngsters so as not to further enrage them. At the very least, everyone will be safer and no greater damage will have been done. For when I was on lunchroom duty, 2 girls got into a fist fight. The security guard wanted to bring them to the principal's office, but I told him I'd handle it myself. Each girl tried to tell me her side. I refused to listen and warned them that if it ever happened again, I'd personally take them to the principal. Now I'm having second thoughts. How else could I have handled it? You could have listened as each girl stated her case, and then reflected each one's point of view. So, Ellen, you were angry at Rosa because. And Rosa, you were furious because you thought, by acknowledging their rage at each other, you would have helped to defuse it. A principal reported that whenever two children who had been fighting were brought to his office, he used a method he learned from the late child psychologist Dr. Haim Jinot. He would sit the students down at opposite ends of his desk, hand each of them a sharp pencil and a yellow legal pad, and say, "I want to know exactly what happened in writing." Typically, one of the antagonists would protest, "But it wasn't my fault." The other would counter with, "He hit me first." The principal would nod and say, "Make sure you put that in your report. I want to know in detail how it started, how it developed, and what each of you felt. And be sure to include your recommendations for the future." After the children finished writing, he would read both reports and respectfully acknowledge each child's experience. Then he'd ask them to share their recommendations with each other and come to an agreement. Stories from teachers. This first story was from a junior high school teacher. I came into my classroom and caught Joe drawing an elaborate picture on the inside cover of his math book. This was one day after I had given the class a lecture on not defacing school property. Normally I would have yanked him out of his seat and yelled, "That's it. Go to the office." Instead I walked over to his desk and stood there. Joe slammed his book shut, trying to hide his drawing. I said, "Let me repeat what I said yesterday. It makes me angry to see people marking up books. These textbooks are going to have to be used for the next 5 years, and I expect my students to take good care of them." "Sorry," Joe mumbled. "I forgot." "I see," I said, and went back to my desk. When I returned to Joe's desk a moment later, he was diligently trying to erase the drawing with his tiny, worn-out eraser. I handed him mine and said, "Here, this might make the job easier. And you can use this small pad whenever you get the urge to doodle." Joe looked surprised and said, "Thanks." I said, "You're welcome," and started my lesson. A month has passed, and Joe hasn't drawn in his textbook since. He keeps the pad in his shirt pocket and shows me his drawings from time to time. I'm glad I didn't send him to the office that day. It might have stopped him from marking up his books, but we never would have had the relationship we have today. And who knows, I may have encouraged a budding Picasso. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. A guidance counselor reported how she helped a child avoid his teacher's threatened punishment by accepting his feelings and offering him a choice. I went into a third-grade classroom to pick up 3 children to be tested for a special education program. 2 of them got up immediately to come with me. Khalil just sat there, head down, looking angry. The classroom teacher said, "Khalil, Ms. Gordon is here. She's waiting." No response. Well, I can see Khalil doesn't want to be cooperative today. Still no response. "Khalil, if you want to go on that field trip tomorrow, you'd better leave with Ms. Gordon now." Khalil's head sank lower. I went over to his seat, knelt down beside him, and whispered, "You don't want to come today?" Khalil, angrily, "I don't want to be near Joseph." Me, "Oh. Well, I can think of 2 possibilities. You can come with me and I'll keep Joseph as far away from you as possible, or I can give you the test now, right here in this classroom." Khalil was quiet for a long time. Then he got up and left with me. I was so glad I was able to think of a choice that would give him a way out. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This final story was reported to us by a school social worker. Sean was 7, an attractive, intelligent child in a class for children with emotional and behavioral difficulties. He did poorly in school and no amount of encouragement, gold stars, or stickers made much of a dent in his defenses. He averted his gaze from those who wished to help him, shrugged his shoulders when asked what the trouble was, and at home slithered away from his mother's affectionate overtures. He also feared heights. No slides or jungle gyms for him. History given by the family revealed that Sean's early discipline in school had included the paddle in 1st grade for inattention and a ruler on his shoulder blades and knuckles in the 2nd grade for disruptive behavior. His mother, meaning to be cooperative with the school, had given the teacher permission, in Sean's presence, to handle him however she thought best. I encouraged the parents to talk about these matters with Sean in relaxed, informal sessions. They were surprised after only 1 or 2 times to find Sean clearly recalling each school experience of being paddled or struck with a ruler. Suddenly he blurted out to his mother his first expression of pent-up rage as he beat his fists on her knee. "But, Mom, you told her she could hit me. You told her she could." His mother was taken aback. She explained that she never intended to have anyone hurt him. At the end of the session, she and Sean shared an affectionate hug for the first time in over a year. A day or so later, Sean and his father were playing outside with a ball that became stuck on the roof of the house. The father took out the ladder, intending to go after the ball, but Sean suddenly said, "No, let me." He successfully negotiated the ladder and retrieved the ball, obviously overjoyed with himself. He ran into the house, grabbed his mother around the waist, and shouted triumphantly, "Mom, since I told you my secret, I can for solving problems together." 6 steps that engage children's creativity and commitment. On the last day of my first year of teaching, Tasha, a chronic talker with a loud voice, told me, "You were too easy on us. You let us get away with murder." I laughed and said, "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" She answered, "I was having too much fun." We both smiled as she sauntered out the door, but as soon as she was gone, my smile vanished. Could Tasha be right? Had I let the kids get away with murder? Maybe. I was so eager not to be punitive, to be liked by everyone, that I overlooked what I considered petty stuff: kids interrupting each other, or putting each other down, or someone shouting across the room. Why spoil an interesting lesson by making a big deal over a few minor transgressions? But Tasha had let me know that she had taken advantage of my desire to be nice. And she probably wasn't the only one. I resolved to be tougher next year, to lay down the rules on the first day of class and to be strict about enforcing them. But after a few weeks into September, I found myself slipping again. For instance, my idea of a good discussion is a lively, free-flowing exchange with one thought sparking another. If one student excitedly interrupted another, that didn't seem like a cardinal sin to me. If someone disagreed with what she heard, and in the heat of the moment sneered, "That's stupid," I let it go. But as the interruptions and put-downs grew, our class discussions rapidly degenerated into noisy brawls. Still, I couldn't bring myself to dampen the enthusiasm with reminders and reprimands. Maybe I was naive, but my expectation was that at some point, the kids themselves would realize that they should start being more civil to each other. The only realization that came was mine. These kids weren't about to change unless their teacher changed. They needed an adult to teach them some basic social skills and to insist that they use them. But how would I go about it? I thought about the chapter on problem solving and how to talk so kids will listen. The theory is that when parents and children examine problems and work out solutions together, children are much more likely to try to make those solutions work. An interesting idea. I studied the step-by-step process for problem solving and wrote out my own adaptation for possible use with my class. Listen to my students' feelings and needs. Summarize their point of view. Express my feelings and needs. Invite the class to brainstorm with me to find a solution. Write down all ideas without evaluating. Together decide which ideas we plan to use and how we plan to implement them. As I reviewed the 6 steps, I felt momentarily overwhelmed. Could I actually steer the class through this whole long, complicated process? Then again, maybe it wouldn't be as hard as it seemed. Basically, I told myself, it's a matter of the kids expressing their feelings, of me expressing mine, and then all of us working together on finding solutions. Certainly it was worth a try. Here, in cartoon form, are the highlights of what took place the first time I tried problem solving with my students. Problem solving. Listen to your students' feelings and needs. Summarize their point of view. Express your feelings and needs. Invite the class to brainstorm with you to find a solution. Write down all ideas without evaluating. Together decide which ideas you don't like, which you do, and how you plan to put them into action. Important changes took place as a result of that problem-solving session. The number of interruptions dropped dramatically. Those few students who continued to interrupt would catch themselves and say, "Oops," or "Sorry," and then politely wait their turn. But the most gratifying outcome for me was the respectful way the kids began to listen to each other. Even those who slipped back into an unthinking "that's stupid" were stopped in their tracks by a class groan. Typically, the offender would give an embarrassed smile, look at the board, and mechanically read, "I don't see it that way." Everyone would laugh, but even though it was a rote recitation, the new words changed the tone of the discussion. Best of all, I didn't have to worry about being the put-down policeman. My students were in charge of monitoring themselves. I was so proud of their new self-control and growing sensitivity to one another that on Meet the Teacher night I decided to tell the parents about it. After everyone was seated, I greeted the parents and shared my goals for the term. Then, pointing to the "Use Respectful Talk" chart on the chalkboard, I described the problem the class had had and the process we used to resolve it. The parents seemed interested. A flurry of comments and questions followed. I just came back from a management training workshop and the conflict resolution skills they taught us were very much like the ones you just described. This sounds like the kind of thing you could do at home with your own kids. I'd never have the patience to go through all those steps with my children. Suppose a child isn't willing to think about solutions. Or suppose he comes up with an idea that's foolish or dangerous, then what do you do? What happens if you agree to a plan and the kids don't hold up their part of the bargain? Then what? Clearly they all wanted to know more. I explained that I had no experience using these methods as a parent, but that, if they were interested, I'd be glad to share what I had discovered as a teacher. They were very interested. I started by explaining that the more I experimented with the problem-solving approach, the more I realized how much I had to keep in mind in order to make it work. Here are the highlights of what I told the parents I had learned from trial and error. Don't even try to problem solve if you're feeling rushed or agitated. In order to tackle a difficult problem successfully, you need time, a clear head, and inner calm. The first step, hearing the children out, is the most important. My tendency was to rush through this beginning step in order to get to the good part, namely, brainstorming for as many solutions as possible. Student, Ms. Lander, I got a D on my social studies test. Me, well, what can you do to make sure that doesn't happen again? Any ideas? I've since learned that students are not willing to work on finding solutions until their feelings have been acknowledged. Me, you sound pretty upset about that grade. Let's go over your essay answers together. Maybe you can tell me more about what you had in mind. Be brief when expressing your feelings. The kids could listen attentively to a short statement of what I felt, but they'd tune me out if I went on and on about my worry or my frustration or my resentment. Resist the urge to evaluate their suggestions. It was very hard for me to keep myself from commenting when the kids came up with solutions that were clearly off the wall. The time I said, "There is no way we could do that," was the time the whole problem-solving process screeched to a halt. No one offered a single suggestion after that. If you want to get the wheels of creativity spinning, you have to welcome every idea, no matter how nutty. Okay, anyone who interrupts has to have his mouth taped up for a week. I've got that down. What else? Make sure to work out a plan to implement the final decision. I had to learn not to let myself relax in the glow of having helped to facilitate a wonderful solution. The best of intentions can go down the drain unless everyone agrees on a method for putting the solution into action and then deciding who will be responsible for what. Don't lose heart if the plan fails. It's easy to berate the kids for not following through on their own plan. The one time I did, the class became sullen and hostile. I finally learned that it was much wiser to schedule another meeting and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. In other words, one problem-solving session might not be enough. By returning to the drawing board, you can usually find answers you missed the first time around. At the end of my long monologue, the bell rang. Some parents left to meet other teachers, but a few remained behind and clustered around my desk. They wanted a chance to talk more. A father asked, "Do you think this method you just described could help with homework problems?" "I'd be interested in your answer to that one," a mother said, "because from the time Lara comes home from school, I'm busy with her homework." Her comment confused me. "You're busy with her homework?" I asked. "Not all the time," she said, "but isn't a parent supposed to help with homework?" "What kind of help?" I asked. "Well, when Lara comes home from school, I make her show me her assignments and I go over them with her and help her get organized. This afternoon I took her to the library and we picked out some excellent books for her report on Eleanor Roosevelt. I was horrified. Lara was a reasonably capable student. The purpose of my homework assignments was to give her and the other children a chance to organize their own time, to work independently, to exercise their own judgment. As tactfully as I could, I said, "It seems to me that the best kind of help we can give children is indirect help. Provide a quiet place to work, a good light, a dictionary, a snack if they're hungry, and just be available if they want to ask you something." Lara's mother looked at me with raised eyebrows. Obviously my little speech hadn't convinced her of anything. I tried to recall what my parents had done with me and my sister when we were growing up. Homework was considered serious business in our house, a top priority. We had this routine where every night after dinner we cleared the kitchen table, sat down, spread out our books and papers, and did our homework. There was no question of whether we could or should or would do it. It was simply homework time. Aloud I said, "How would you feel about establishing a nightly routine with Lara? She could either work alone in her room or maybe somewhere near you, and little by little you could make yourself scarce and let Lara take over." "I wish it were that simple," Lara's mother said with some irritation, "but the plain fact is, she won't do her homework if I don't keep after her. She—" "Please don't take offense," another woman interrupted, "but I don't think you're being fair to your daughter. My mother used to hound me about my homework every night and hover over me to make sure that I did it all and got it right. Sometimes she'd take over and do it for me. After a while I wouldn't even start my homework unless my mother was there. I guess on some level I figured that as long as she was being responsible for me, I didn't have to be responsible for myself. So that's my reason for having a hands-off homework policy with my daughter." Lara's mother looked bewildered. "You mean you never help your child with her homework?" "Well, if she's stuck, I'll listen to what's bothering her and try to get her unstuck. But the second she gets going again, I bow out. I want her to know that she's the one in charge of her homework and that she's basically capable of doing it herself." "That's assuming she is," Lara's mother persisted. "But what if she isn't?" Without hesitating the woman retorted, "Then get outside help, a tutor, a high school student, or tell her to call another kid in her class. Anything to avoid what happens when parents take over and become passionate about their children's homework." A man who had been listening intently nodded his head vigorously in agreement. "What are you thinking?" I asked him. "About my own father," he said. "It killed him that I was having so much trouble with math. Finally he decided that he was the one to teach it to me. Every night he'd make me sit with him and listen to his long explanations. He'd always start out patiently, but when I still didn't get it, he'd become furious with me and explain it all again, only louder. I may have learned a little math from him, but it sure didn't do much for our relationship. That's why I make it clear to my son, Tim, that homework is his job, just the way my work is my job." Another father challenged him. "But suppose Tim doesn't see it your way?" "Well, as a matter of fact, last year he did give me a hard time. When Tim joined the soccer team, it became the most important thing in his life, and I received a letter from his teacher saying that he hadn't been doing his homework." "What did you say to him?" Lara's mother asked. "Actually, I didn't say anything to Tim. I made an appointment with the teacher for a conference. I thanked her for notifying me but told her that, knowing Tim, it would be far more effective if he received a letter from her instead of a lecture from me. Then I handed her 5 copies of a typed form that read, 'Dear Tim, the following assignments are still due. Dates, underscore 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 un. Please let me know by tomorrow morning when I can expect them. Sincerely yours. I also gave her 5 stamped, addressed envelopes and told her how much I appreciated her help. We all looked at him expectantly. Then what happened? I asked. The first letter surprised him, but he managed to ignore it. But when the second one arrived and Tim realized that his teacher meant business, he started bringing in his homework. And he has ever since. My goodness, Lara's mother said with admiration, you really solved that one. Yeah, that worked out well, but this term I have another problem. Now he leaves his homework for the last minute and stays up until all hours trying to get it done. I'm always after him to start earlier and he always has some excuse why he can't. His sister is bothering him or he's working on his model airplanes or he's watching his TV show. Lara's mother turned to me. Ms. Lander, you were telling us about problem solving before. Do you see that approach as something that could work with Tim? It might, I said, suddenly wishing Jane were here to help me. Tim's father frowned. Exactly how would you go about doing it? He asked. All eyes were on me. I asked Tim's father to describe what usually happened when he insisted that his son start his homework earlier. Then we all discussed what might happen if Tim and his father sat down and problem solved together. On the following pages you'll see the 2 scenarios we envisioned. A battle over homework. Solving the problem together. Listen to the child's feelings and needs. Show you understand. Express your feelings and needs. Invite the child to brainstorm with you. Write down all ideas without evaluating. Together decide which ideas you don't like, which you do, and how you plan to follow through. A few days after, meet the teacher, night I had a call from Tim's father. He wanted to tell me what happened when he talked to his son. It was pretty close to what we had imagined, he said. The only problem was the schedule Tim worked out. He had himself watching 2 hours of TV and going to bed at 11. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. So we reviewed his schedule and I helped him revise it. We finally agreed that he'd start his homework a half hour earlier, allow 1 hour for TV, and be in bed by 9:30 with lights out at 10 o'clock. As the weeks went by, my understanding and appreciation of the problem-solving approach continued to deepen. I began to see that the long-term benefits of the process were much greater than the immediate rewards of smoother classroom routines or the resolution of persistent problems at home. When we invite a child to join us in tackling a problem, we send a powerful set of messages. I believe in you. I trust your ability to think wisely and creatively. I value your contributions. I see our relationship not as all-powerful grown-up, exercising authority over ignorant child, but as adult and child who are equal, not in competence, not in experience, but in equal dignity. If there's one thing we can guarantee all of our children, now and in the future, it's problems sometimes one right after the other. But by teaching them how to approach a problem, by showing them how to break it down into manageable parts, by encouraging them to use their own ingenuity to resolve their problems, we are giving them skills they can depend upon for the rest of their lives. A quick reminder. Problem solving. At home and in school. 1. Listen to the child's feelings and needs. Adult, you seem very upset about failing your Spanish test. Child, I am. I only got 12 words right out of 20, and I studied for an hour last night. 2. Summarize the child's point of view. Adult, you sound pretty discouraged. Even though you tried to cram all those new words into your head, some of them refused to stick. 3. Express your feelings and needs. Adult, my concern is that if you don't memorize the basic vocabulary, you'll get further and further behind. 4. Invite the child to brainstorm with you. Adult, I wonder, if we put our heads together, could we come up with some new and more effective ways to study? 5. Write down all ideas without evaluating. Child, drop Spanish. Adult, writing I've got that. What else? Child, maybe I could. 6. Together decide which ideas you don't like, which you do, and how you plan to put them into action. Adult, what do you think of the idea of making flashcards and studying? Only 4 new words each night? Child, that's okay. But instead of flashcards, I like the idea of saying my words into a tape recorder and testing myself until I know them. Questions and stories. From parents and teachers. Questions from parents. 1. I notice that you start problem solving by listening to the child's point of view. Would there be anything wrong with reversing the order and having the adult express what bothers her first? That might work. However, some children become defensive and shut down when grown ups begin by expressing their irritation. It's a lot easier for children to understand and care about an adult's point of view after the adult has demonstrated genuine caring and acceptance of their feelings. 2. I start problem solving with my kids with the best of intentions, but when I get to the part where I express my feelings, I find it hard not to start blaming and accusing them. Any ideas? One way to avoid blame is to shun the accusing you. You kids never. You. Always. The trouble with you is, instead substitute an I for a you. 4. Example, here's what I feel. I get upset when. What I'd like to see is. As long as they're not being attacked, children can listen to your feelings without becoming defensive. 3. I noticed that sometimes when I start brainstorming with my children, they'll accuse me. For instance, I'll suggest, maybe I could do thus and so, and they'll say, no, you won't. Remember last time? How you, and suddenly we're sidetracked into a long argument about what happened in the past. Is there any way to avoid this? If your children start to accuse you, you can get them back on track with a statement like, let's not blame each other for what happened in the past. What we all need to think about now is a solution for the future. 4. I have a situation that can't be solved by problem solving. Hardly a week goes by that one or another of my 3 foster children doesn't tell me that someone at school either bullied him or called him a name, or made fun of him because of his sneakers, his haircut, or the slant of his eyes. I tell them all to ignore that stupid nonsense. What else can I do? A hurt should never be ignored. A wounded child needs to know that someone can understand his pain. He needs an adult to acknowledge how frightening or deeply hurtful it can be to be assaulted either physically or emotionally, for any reason. After you've empathized with him, you can enlist the support of the other children. At a family meeting you can tackle the problem together. Everyone can discuss any or all of the following questions. Did anything like what happened to Chulsu ever happen to you? What was your reaction? What can you do when someone makes fun of you? Pretend you don't hear. Change the subject. Agree. Use humor. Yeah, it's a flat top. Haircut. Makes it easier to stand on my head. What can you do if you're physically threatened? Call for help. Yell. Watch out behind you, and run away fast. Tell the bully you have a contagious, fatal disease. Learn karate. Who are the adults who can help put an end to the teasing or bullying? The teacher? The principal? Your foster parent? The bully's parent? After you've written down all of the solutions that have come out of your discussion, the children can take turns practicing them by role-playing scenes in which one child teases or bullies another. By the end of your group problem-solving session, the children might all feel more empowered as individuals and as a family. Stories from parents. This first story was from a mother who used problem-solving as a way of taking the pressure off herself and helping her children become more responsible. Last year my 3 girls, 6, 8, and 12, carried on so much about having to have the right clothes and the right sneakers and the right supplies for the new school year that I let them steamroller me into spending more than I could afford. This year when the first back-to-school ads came out in the paper, I decided to head the kids off at the pass. I called a family meeting and asked them to write down all the things they felt they absolutely had to have for the new term. We also made up a wish list for what they'd like to buy if the family won the lottery. Then I told them, in plain language, about my need to exercise a little fiscal restraint so that we could continue to enjoy the basic necessities of life like eating and having a roof over our heads. They protested at first, but after a while started coming up with all kinds of suggestions, everything from we'll bake cookies and sell them to the neighbors to we could make our own clothes, but you'd have to buy us a sewing machine. In the end, the idea that appealed to them most came from Jessica, my 12-year-old. Give each of us the money and we'll manage it ourselves. She even volunteered to help her sisters with their budgets. I agreed, even though I had my doubts. I'm not sure the younger ones fully understand all the implications of their solution, but it has already had an effect upon Jessica. I was helping her shop for a sweater and pointed to a pretty blue one on the rack. She went right for the price tag and said, "Mom, I don't believe you. This is much too expensive." *****. This next story was from a mother who was coping with her 3-year-old's separation anxiety. All the other mothers dropped their children off at preschool with a cheerful goodbye, but Allison would get hysterical whenever I started to move toward the door. She'd run after me and hang onto my arm and cry bitterly. I was starting to feel desperate. It was 3 weeks into the term and she showed no sign of letting up. One morning I decided to try problem solving. After breakfast I sat her on my lap and said, "Allison, you really like me to stay with you at preschool. And, notice I said and, not but, today I need to leave to do my errands. So I was wondering what we could do." She looked at me blankly. I said, "Would it help if you had your teddy bear with you?" She shook her head no. "How about my fuzzy scarf?" She shook her head again and buried her face in my shoulder. "You stay," she said. And then a minute later, "Go. But give me 11 hugs." Suddenly I had an inspiration. I took her hand, kissed her palm, and closed it. I said, "Now you have my kiss. Quick, put it in your pocket and whenever you miss me, you can take it out and give yourself a kiss from Mommy. What do you think of that?" Her face lit up. She shoved her kiss deep in her pocket, and that morning, for the first time, she let me go. *****. This next conversation was reported by the father of a 14-year-old boy who was being pressured by his peers to drink. "My son, Zach, knows how I feel about drugs and alcohol. I've always tried to give him straight information, no scare tactics. Recently I heard rumors that the kids were going to this one particular house after school when the parents weren't home and drinking. When I drove Zach to basketball practice, I told him what I'd heard and asked him if it was true. He looked at me uneasily but didn't answer. "Did you ever drink?" I asked. "I had a beer once," he said. Before I could say anything, he burst out, "Dad, I had to. Everyone makes fun of you if you don't." I wanted to say, "So if everyone makes fun of you for not jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge, do you jump?" Instead I said, "So you're under a lot of pressure from your peers." "You'd better believe it," he said. "You should hear what they call the kids who don't drink." I told him I could see what he was up against, but I also said, "You know how I feel about drugs, and alcohol is a drug. Even if it were legal to drink. At your age, I'd object. You've told me that you don't like me to control you. But what I've observed about kids and grown ups who drink is that sometimes the drink ends up controlling them. So what do you want me to do?" Zach said belligerently. "Say something dumb like, 'I don't need it, I'm high on life.'" I said, "Is that the problem? How to say no and remain part of the crowd?" Zach shrugged, but I knew that was it. For the rest of the ride we played around with lines he could use to refuse a drink diplomatically. The one Zach thought least nerdy was, "Thanks, maybe later." And if pressed, to blame it on his strict parents. "You don't know my father. He'd kill me if he smelled liquor on my breath. I'd be grounded for the rest of my life." Zach chuckled over that one and gave me a big thanks, Dad, when I dropped him off at his game. Questions from teachers. 1. Do you have to go through all the steps of the problem-solving process for it to work? Not necessarily. One teacher described how 9-year-old Spencer, a serious, hard-working student, became angry whenever the other children in his science group fooled around or stopped working even for a few minutes. One day he lost all control and threw books and papers on the floor. The teacher decided that this latest development warranted the full problem-solving approach. She sat down with him and started with Spencer. I can see how much it upsets you when the other children in your group begin to joke around. Once you start on a project, you don't like to have any interruptions. Almost immediately Spencer responded, yeah, because I want to finish. And they make me forget what I'm doing. Then, after a short pause, he stood up and said, can I go to the back table and work alone when they start to mess around? The teacher was startled. She said, you think that would help? He nodded and said, that way I won't get so mad and throw things. And from that moment on, that's how Spencer coped. One of my students, Debbie, can never remember to bring her books to school. I tried to problem solve with her, but got nowhere. She just joked around and acted silly. Any suggestions? If a child resists your efforts to problem solve, a note based upon the same principles can serve as an effective substitute. For example, you might write, Dear Debbie, you told me that it's hard for you to remember to bring your books to school and that sometimes you just forget. I need to know that all of my students have their books with them every day, so that they can do their work. Please think of a way to remind yourself to bring your books with you each morning. I'll think, too. Then let's exchange ideas and see which one you want to put into action. Sincerely, Mrs. G. 3. When a teacher and student are thinking about possible solutions together, is it really necessary to write them down? Isn't it enough to simply tell them to each other? Sometimes it is. However, don't underestimate the rush of pride and pleasure that wells up within a child at seeing his ideas taken seriously enough to be written down by his teacher. The sight of his words on paper not only gives him a visual appreciation of his thought process but inspires him to continue to think creatively. For last week I was problem solving with a girl in my class about her chronic lateness. We were making steady progress until we got to the part where we were supposed to start brainstorming together. I immediately offered 2 excellent suggestions. She immediately clammed up. What went wrong? It's always a good idea to wait after asking a child to brainstorm with you. Let her come up with the first few ideas. Your silence is an invitation, a mark of respect, a way of saying that thoughts need time to form and grow. When an adult moves in too quickly, even with the most excellent of suggestions, the child often feels less able to generate an excellent suggestion of her own. 5. I'm worried about the increasing incidence of violence in my school. Sometimes over an issue as trivial as a dirty look. Since problem-solving skills seem to be so effective when we use them with students, why couldn't children be taught these skills so they could use them with each other? You'll be glad to know that in programs across the country, students from kindergarten age on up through high school are receiving training in conflict resolution skills. A growing number of educators are convinced that since conflict between human beings is inevitable, learning how to deal with disagreements and resolve them peacefully is as important a subject for children as math or social studies. In schools where these programs are in effect, teachers report, what I like about the program is that the kids are putting out their own fires. And that frees me to teach. I love seeing these 4th and 5th graders out there with their clipboards and orange conflict manager t-shirts. Ever since we instituted the training, the lunchroom, playground, and classrooms have become much more peaceful places. It amazes me to see how after a 15-hour course, some of the worst kids in the school become the best mediators. I think they do better than we do with the kids who act out, because they speak the same language. Everyone seems to agree that young people who have mastered the skills for listening to each other with respect and seeing a conflict as a problem to be solved rather than a battle to be won are our best hope for a peaceful world. Stories from teachers. This first story illustrates how the problem-solving approach helped a teacher get to the root of a problem. Jenny is a delightful 12-year-old except when we're doing math. Then she turns into a demanding, whiny baby who can't work on her own. Talk about math anxiety. Over the school year I tried every strategy one knew to give her confidence. I Even had her tested so she could get extra help if she needed it, but her scores were too high to qualify her for the resource room. I finally ended up ignoring her. Result? She stopped working altogether. In sheer desperation I decided to go the problem-solving route. Here's what happened. Me, Jenny, I know how much you worry about doing math. Jenny, I do. I just hate the stuff. Me, because some of it seems too hard. Jenny, yes. And I make mistakes. Me, and that upsets you. Jenny, yeah, because then you'll be mad at me. Last year Mr. G yelled at me for being stupid and making so many mistakes. I was stunned. Me, is that what has you worried? You think I'll yell, too? Jenny, teary-eyed, Me, taking her hands in mine, Jenny, you've got to give yourself permission to make lots of mistakes. That's something all good students know. Mistakes can be useful. Annoying, but useful. Jenny, useful? Me, yes, because they tell you what you still need to learn. Besides, sometimes a mistake can lead to a discovery. Look what Columbus found from his mistake. Jenny, big smile, America. So you won't be mad if I get the wrong answer? Me, no, Jenny. I just wish there were a way you could do your math without worrying so much about getting it right. Jenny, maybe I could try to get the answer by myself, but if I can't? Me, I'll help you. And if I'm busy, maybe your friend Claudia can help you. Over the next few weeks I could see Jenny working longer and harder on her own. She asked if she could sit next to Claudia, but they didn't compare answers until Jenny was finished with her work. I think what helped her turn a corner was not so much being near her friend as knowing that making a mistake was not a catastrophe. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. This last example came from a special education teacher who taught in an inner-city school. Too, she said, many of my kids are products of physical and emotional abuse. They come to school like firecrackers ready to explode. I can't get through a period without a fight erupting. One will say, "You're stupid," or to her mother, or kick someone under the table, and there goes my lesson. Despite her doubts, she decided to try problem solving to see what might come of it. Here are excerpts from her written report. I decided that if the first step of problem solving was to find out how the kids really felt about fighting, I should start by asking them what was good about fighting. Here's the list we developed. What's good about fighting? 1. Getting back. This was definitely the most popular. 2. Getting someone in trouble. 3. Getting someone to chase you. 4. Snapping, insulting, is funny. 5. They won't mess with you again. 6. You feel like it. 7. They start up first. 8. Class is boring, teacher's contribution. 9. Getting someone mad. 10. It's fun to play rough. They were pretty rambunctious as we were working out the list. Then I asked, what's bad about fighting, and they became solemn. Here's what they said. What's bad about fighting? 1. After you fight, you feel bad if it's your friend. 2. You can get into trouble with mother, teacher, principal. 3. It puts your teacher in a bad mood, teacher's contribution. 4. You can hurt somebody. 5. You can get suspended. 6. You don't get to learn, teacher's contribution. 7. It could start a worse fight. 8. You could get hurt, beaten up, scratched, bitten, black eye. Then we went to work on trying to think of solutions. I thought twice about writing down some of their suggestions, but then I remembered that it was important not to reject any of their ideas. Possible solutions. 1. Ask to go out and let off steam. 2. Hit him. 3. Walk away. 4. Pound the clay. 5. Squeeze hand grippers. 6. Break a stick. 7. Call his mother. 8. Let them fight it out in the gym with no crowd. 9. Tell the teacher. 10. Change your seat. 11. Tell him to leave you alone. 12. Send him to the office. 13. Make him write something 100 times. 14. Make him lick the floor. 15. Everybody hit him once. 16. Give stickers to the ones who follow the rules. 17. Write something mean to him. 18. Say something nice back to him to make him embarrassed. After we had all 18 items listed, I commented on some of them. 4. Example, I told them I couldn't allow them to fight it out, because I didn't want them hurting each other. Also, licking the floor didn't seem very sanitary to me. They all had strong opinions about the rest of the list, each preferring different solutions. After more discussion and more suggestions, we agreed that each student should copy into his notebook the solutions that made the most sense to him. At the end of the period, we wrote on the board the rules we could all agree to. 1. No insults. 2. No curses. 3. Don't tell on anyone else unless they are bothering you. 4. No hitting or throwing. 5. Use your own solutions. Here are the results of that day. Luis, who has the shortest fuse, walks out of the room several times a week. He stands in the doorway so he won't miss anything. After a while, he comes in and sits at the back of the room. After a few minutes more, he joins the class. Every once in a while, one student will pop up and say, "Carlos, change with me," and change his seat. Carlos is pretty good-natured about changing. Twice a student pounded the clay. Once Darren said, "Give him the clay to pound." When one student insults another, the class calls out, "Rule number 1." or "Rule number 2." They also say, "Make him read the rule," and the offender will read the rule. They also decided that they would not even insult the garbage can. Once, Darren said, to her mother, to the garbage can, and Luis thought Darren was saying it to him, and it started a fight, so the class added a new rule about not cursing things. I wish I could say that putting this whole approach into action came naturally to me. It didn't. It took thought, effort, and a lot more time than I wanted to spend. It would have been much easier for me to write these kids off as incorrigible or